Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome to another video. Today on the podcast, A Naked Convo with, we have two very special guests. We have Hanna and Nick from Two Naturist on a boat. Thank you guys for joining. How are you doing today?
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking us.
Yeah.
We are cold, but otherwise we're great.
I would like to apologize for having you guys doing this dress. This is the first time I see you guys dressed. But as everyone knows, we have been constantly censored by different platforms, and I think it would be great to be able to share this conversation on as many platforms as possible. So unfortunately, in order to do so, we're going to have to record this dress. Maybe someday we'll find a way around it, but it is what it is. So guys, thank you very much for joining us once again, and tell us a little bit about who is Hanna and who is Nick. Ladies first, please.
Oh gosh, okay. So I'm Hannah. I'm 35 now, born in the UK. But obviously, those of you who know us from Two Naturist on a boat will know that we've travelled a little bit in recent years. Gosh, don't know what to say next, really.
What was your job before you became Two Naturist?
Oh, well, okay. So I trained as a lawyer, worked as a lawyer for about 10 years before we went travelling. And since we've come back from the boat, I'm working sort of in risk management, kind of legal risk management for the National Health Service in the UK, so medical practice.
Pretty busy right
Yeah,
now.
so that's kind of my background, really.
She also used to row for Great Britain, hence the enormous muscles,
A very long time ago.
but not anymore.
No.
She used to do what? I'm sorry?
She used to row in the, well, you tell them,
Rowing,
Oh.
in a rowing boat.
in the
Great.
Great Britain rowing team.
Awesome.
So I'm Nick. I'm older than Hannah. I'm 59, if you must know. I was also a lawyer before we started to go travelling. I've been lots of other things. I've been a teacher. I've been a football coach. I've been a gardener. I've been a buyer of fruit and veg. I've worked for a newspaper.
So
I've done a lot of things, but my main job for 20 years was as a lawyer in England. And we did that until, 4 years ago or so?
3 years ago, Christmas 2017 into New Year 2018.
When we sort of decided that there was possibly more to see around the world than our office desks, which were beginning to bore us. So we sold a house. Well, we sold our house, and we bought a boat. It was an utterly ridiculous thing to do.
Sounds like a
we
fun
didn't.
adventure.
I had done quite a lot of sailing in the past, but
I hadn't.
but I'd never lived on a boat. And so we bought this old boat called Waterbird, which was in the Canary Islands at the time. And we went out to the Canaries because she hadn't been to sea for 10 years. So there was lots of work to do on her. We had to do lots of repairs and update her completely. We were there for about a year, in fact, possibly a bit longer than a year, doing all this stuff. And I suppose it was in the Canaries that we started being Two Naturists on a boat. But I have been a naturist for a long time. Actually, since I was a teenager, really, I was brought up in a sort of evangelical Christian household in Oxford. My parents they weren't strict, but they definitely had views on the human body, which was that it was at best sinful and at worst probably shameful. But they were I come from quite a sort of academic family, and my parents thought it was a good idea to send us to various countries around Europe to learn different languages. And I was sent at the age of 12 to Germany to stay with a German family on an island in the North Sea. And so I arrived there and was very shocked and quite surprised to find that they spent a lot of time without any clothes on. I'd never seen a naked person before. not even my brothers and sisters, since I was, probably since I was 5 or 6. And yet they were sort of casually naked around the house and in the garden and of course at the beach. And I think it took me about a couple of days to take my clothes off. No one said anything. It seemed completely unremarkable to them. And to me, it was a complete liberation.
How old were you back then?
I was about 12, I think, 12 or 13. No, 12 when I first went there. And then I was sent back several times. I never told my parents, of course. They would have been horrified.
So this was
and they
never a
kept sending me
conversation that
back.
they had in the German house? Like they never talked about nudity? It was just something that casually happened?
They didn't talk about it at all. It just was second nature for them. They were all sort of artists and musicians, so they were quite bohemian.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously something they'd always done and something that to them was quite unremarkable. And I loved that. And I still love that, which is, I think, why on Two Naturist on a Boat, I think our main thing is the hope that nudity could just become unremarkable.
So how was it after this experience? Like when you went back home, I suppose you went from being completely liberated to having to wear clothes all the time again? How did that feel?
Absolutely, yeah. It was fine. I knew, there was one life in Germany and there was one life here, and they were separate. And I was never nude here. I mean, that just wouldn't have worked at all. Until I grew up and left home, and then I started going to beaches and being more of a naturist here in the UK.
I forgot to ask, what city in the UK do you guys live in?
We live in Oxford.
Yeah, we're both kind of from Oxford originally, to have gone away to other places in the UK at various points in our life, but have ultimately ended up back in Oxford.
How is the culture in England when it comes to nudity? Is it common? Because I have the impression that in Germany, it's, depending on where you're from, it's not really that big of a deal. I actually met a German female that came and stayed at my place at Couchsurfing, and it was set up as a naturist experience. So she said that she had never considered herself to be a naturist, because for her it was just normal. Like you're in your house, you feel comfortable, the weather's nice, you take off your clothes. But she had to come to Mexico to realize that was, a thing.
Yeah, it's so I think generally in the UK, I think people aren't fiercely against it in the way that, for example, I think in parts of the United States that people might be. I think there's a general kind of tolerance, but most people sort of view it as something a little bit amusing and a little bit eccentric that most people don't do.
Okay.
So we're quite lucky in the UK in terms of the law, which is effectively that unless you are naked with the intention to shock or sort of deprave, used to be the expression that
shock
the law
and alarm
used.
it is now.
I think it's shock and alarm. So unless you're really going out there with the intention of doing something highly sexualized or highly shocking, it's actually not against the law to be naked anywhere in the UK.
Wow.
So in theory, we could walk down the high street with no clothes on and we wouldn't be committing an offence, as long as we could persuade a court that we were just being naked, we weren't trying to shock people. Obviously, you don't want to get yourself into that situation. Yes. So the way that we approach it, and I think that most people in this country approach it, is just with common sense. You don't rub it in people's faces. You wouldn't go next to like a primary school with little kids and take all your clothes off, because you're going to get yourself in trouble. But, if you're in a relatively secluded part of a riverbank or a secluded part of a beach, then, then it's fine and it's relatively safe to take your clothes off. But I would say that it's not culturally normal. No. And most people in the UK, whilst they wouldn't be deeply offended by other people being naked by them, as I said, most people I think find it, if anything, a little bit amusing. Mm-hmm. But most people I think don't embrace nudity and are not comfortable with nudity.
Yeah. And some people are still very frightened of nudity. I mean, I think the problem is, as in all cultures, is that people in the UK associate nudity with sex.
Yes.
So if you're naked, it must be for a sexual purpose. So if you were to take your clothes off in the park, a lot of people would immediately think it was for a sexual purpose, and somebody would call the police.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't got to the state, although it is legal here, we certainly haven't got to the position where you could comfortably take your clothes off in a public park and
not
expect
at least
anything to
fear
happen.
that you would have a conversation with a police officer.
I think
They probably wouldn't pursue it.
It's probably a matter of exposure and normalizing it.
Absolutely.
For example, our experience here in Mexico is very, I wouldn't say it's Catholic. It has a big Catholic influence, but it's like double standards. It might be a hypocritical country, but people avoid confrontation. So despite the fact that they see nudity as something sexual and probably something that you should hide or not something that you should show in public, they avoid confrontation depending on the scenario. For example, we go to beaches, or we go to rivers, or we go to different places in nature, and we generally try to go a little bit farther away from where the general public is.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
We've come to the conclusion that if people go out of their way to go to a secluded area, they might expect to find something that is unusual, and maybe nudity is probably not that big of a deal. And we have had a lot of people that just pass by as if we were dressed and good afternoon, like everyone just very respectful, and they would just continue their way. Only in one occasion, there was like a group of high school kids that saw us. We were a group of people naked at the river, and they stopped by and they were just like giggling and they would look at us. So I decided to walk up to them and ask them if they wanted to join us. And they said that they didn't want to join us. And I said, well, if you don't want to join us, please continue your way because you're making us feel uncomfortable. And they left.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds as though it's possibly fairly similar to the culture here. You know, I think as we would take the view that, as I said earlier, you wouldn't necessarily do it somewhere very public. You don't want to kind of rub people's faces in it. But at the same time, we don't have a lot of fear that if we're somewhere quite remote, if someone comes across us, that's going to be problematic. And actually, you know, we go for a run every Saturday morning that takes us past a river in Oxford. And actually every Saturday so far, it's now getting really cold, but every Saturday we have gone for a swim at the kind of halfway point.
That's how brave we are.
And probably almost every Saturday, somebody has seen us, someone walking their dog or someone out fishing. But yeah, we've never had any problem.
No, people and just smile.
You get a mixture. Some people kind of do that thing where they stare straight ahead and they pretend they haven't seen you. But I think sometimes that's because they're worried about embarrassing us, maybe. I don't know. But most people will just kind of, you know, throw you a little bit of a smile. And as I say, I think maybe think, oh, that's unusual to see a naked couple in the river in November or now December. And then they probably go away and say, you'll never guess what I saw. You know, I was walking the dog and a couple came out of the water with no clothes on. So it's, you know, that's the kind of culture here. But
I think some of the...
I think the here we have, like in many countries probably, there is only a minority of people who are really against naturism or nudity, but they can be the most vocal minority.
Yes.
And we've seen in England, for example, a lot of swimming pools have naturist swims from time to time, maybe once a week or once a month. And a lot of those have been closed down because they get protesters outside who are claiming that the swimming pool is advertising and promoting paedophilia and that sort of thing. And there is a tendency for the swimming pools to stop the swims because they can't be dealing with the bad publicity and the hassle. So it's only a minority who are really against, but they can be a very vocal minority.
Yeah, that got a lot of attention a couple of months ago, that they had to cancel a really big event. And I think that's causing more of the events to not be family friendly, which can have devastating consequences for the future, because it seems to me, with the way that social media is going and the way that society is behaving, that nudism is going to become something for adults only, which is
Yeah.
which is
And that it also, our worry is that almost reinforces
yes.
the kind of wrong idea that there's something inherently sexual about it.
Exactly.
I think by making it adults only, or sends the message that it's wrong, or it's shameful, or there's something non-child friendly about it.
And I've really noticed, having started naturism in the 70s, the early 70s, I have noticed that there's a lot less children seen at naturist venues now than there were then. I mean, then it really was a family affair, and that has really changed, and that's such a tragedy.
It seems to be going in that direction, and I think it's also really sad because some of the benefits that we experience through naturism, when a child grows with those experiences, they don't have to put up with body negativity, body
Exactly.
shaming,
Yeah.
with the hypersexualization of the body, and all these problems that are inherited to us because of this negative image that we have of the human body. So maybe that's going to get worse. Who knows? But I also feel that most of us are not willing to fight that battle. The making sure the world knows that naturism is family friendly, especially with the radicalization that is going on social media.
Yeah. Well, I think it's particularly difficult on social media because whereas it's fair enough to put your own naked body on social media, if that's your choice, you can't really start putting pictures of your children naked on social media. I mean, I think that is unfair, and I don't think you can do that. So social media, which is where a lot of people experience things these days, doesn't show you children in naturism because it can't.
Yes, I mean, that's a really good, interesting debate and discussion that, children don't really have a saying in what their parents are sharing online. So maybe by the time they become adults, that might be something that they're not okay with, and there's nothing that they can do about it. Once it's online, it's there forever. So
Yeah, that's right.
I think not just, it's perhaps more of an issue when it comes to pictures of children, but one thing that we find very difficult about the social media thing, and we try to fight against, and actually the reason that we only post our own pictures is because of the concern around kind of consent. Yes, somebody might have consented to be naked on the beach, but how do we know that they've consented to their photograph being posted on social media? And I think it can be a little bit of a minefield as to, even with adults, never mind children, as to whether or not photos that are being shared actually are being done so with the knowledge and the consent of the individuals in the photo. And I think, that is why we've stayed very firmly on the track of actually we will only post pictures of ourselves, really.
Okay, Hannah, before we continue, Nick already made a short introduction of himself. I wouldn't want to have your introduction 40 minutes in the conversation. So
Okay.
Can you share with us a little bit of who is Hannah, and a little bit about how your experience was growing up, if it was associated with naturism, and how your first experiences were with social nudity?
Yeah, okay. So it's a bit of a funny one, and actually the thing you mentioned earlier about your the couch surfing German lady that came to stay with you sort of reminded me of this, because I think I never considered growing up that my family were naturists. We certainly didn't engage in public nudity. I mean, I think maybe my parents from time to time may have had a skinny dip, if they were somewhere relatively secluded. But so I wasn't engaged from childhood in public nudity, but just nudity in my household just wasn't a big deal. My parents happily kind of walked around the house naked. We, would go into the bathroom while, the other ones were in there. My parents slept naked. Genuinely, I was like 25 before I realized that wasn't what every grown-up did. Like in my head, I thought, you know, kids wear pajamas and then you become a teenager and then you sleep naked and that's what grown-ups do. I genuinely was about 25 before I realized that that just wasn't what everybody did.
Wow.
So as I say, I guess I wasn't an out and out naturist and my family weren't naturists, but I was always, I guess I was not brought up with any kind of culture or any kind of idea in my head that there was anything wrong about nudity. You know, I used to go to swimming pools and stuff as a kid, and you know, my mum wasn't one of those people who'd be getting dressed under the towel. She would just get changed, you know. So I suppose for me there was never any kind of shame attached to it or fear that there was anything wrong with it. So that was the kind of starting point in the context. Obviously I recognized that being naked in public was not usual, and I followed the norms of society and I wore clothes when I was up. Like I'm not saying that I wasn't taught, you know, when it's appropriate to wear clothes and not, but nudity for me was just never an issue. So although I hadn't practiced public nudity until I was with Nick, and I was probably 25 or something, I guess, maybe a little bit younger, 23. I guess it didn't take me long on a naturist beach to
about
go
10 minutes, I'd say,
to kind of say, actually, yeah, I'm comfortable with this. Certainly when Nick suggested that we go to a beach that was a naturist beach, I had absolutely no issue with being in that environment. Like being around other people that were naked didn't remotely faze me. I didn't question it as anything that I'd be uncomfortable with. When we first got there, I think I was topless straight away, but I didn't immediately, you know, remove my bikini bottoms because it was just, I suppose I hadn't been naked in public before. But yeah, after our first swim, you know, I was a little bit uncomfortable in wet bathing clothes, and Nick just kind of said, well, you know, look, you can see everybody here's naked, nobody's staring, nobody's, you know, making anybody feel uncomfortable, why don't you give it a try? And I did. And then I think, which is what most people's experience is, within just a few minutes you very quickly realize that actually it feels completely normal, completely natural, really genuinely nobody is staring or looking at you. In fact, naturist beaches, in my experience, tend to be more kind of respectful in terms of people giving you your privacy and not staring and that kind of thing than regular beaches are. And so that was it really. We started, if ever we went to the beach, we would choose to go to naturist beaches. And then I suppose it would have been about 2011, we were on a holiday. We needed somewhere to stay. We hadn't booked a campsite. We had our camping stuff with us. And just in the town that we were in, we saw that there was a naturist campsite. So we just said, well, should we give it a try? And so we went for a week naturist camping. And I suppose that was probably the turning point in terms of me being like, actually, yeah, I'm totally cool with this. I enjoy this lifestyle. You know, nudity can be fun and liberating and comfortable. And do you know what? When you're camping, it's really practical.
Really practical.
Less luggage,
you know,
of course.
Yeah.
Less luggage,
but also not having that thing where you have to get dressed in a cramped tent. And, you know, when you've had your shower in the shower block, having to, you know, get redressed in the wet cubicle, and, you know, you're dropping your trousers on the floor and all those difficulties. So, yeah, I guess by the time we went on the boat, we were, you know, don't get me wrong, we're not naked all the time. We're not, to be frank with you, we're not just dressed this evening because you asked us to get dressed. Like, generally, in a British winter, yes, we wear clothes because it's cold.
Because we're not stupid.
And, you know, for a lot of life, that's how I'm personally comfortable. I mean, actually, sometimes you'll sit and watch TV or something naked and I won't be naked. I suppose my attitude is just, well, whatever I want for me and for actually everybody, whatever feels comfortable to you at the time to be okay. So whether...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, sorry. So I had the question when you were telling us how growing up being naked in your house, in the comfort of your home, was something like second nature? It wasn't something that you guys talked about or anything. Did you ever have the opportunity to have any of these conversations with your friends at school? Or like, for example, how was the experience at lockers? Sometimes after PE or physical, how's it called? Physical education, people would take showers together. Depending on where you're from, that could be something normal. Did you have anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we did have to shower after sport. I think, when you're a child and a teenager, you're quite adaptable, and you kind of just do what the people around you are doing in the particular circumstance. So I guess I just took cues from the people around me that, okay, we don't stand here and have a conversation naked. We just get changed kind of quickly, and we're not going to be super modest about it and make sure that we don't show any skin at all. But at the same time, yeah, I guess I had a feeling that if I had just stood in the middle of my school locker room completely naked, people would have thought I was odd. So I didn't do that.
Okay.
But do you know what? Equally, and it's interesting that you ask it, and my response in a way is interesting, that at no point, I don't think growing up, did I think, oh, are my family unusual in how we behave at home?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think perhaps in my head there was just this divide of, well, that's how you are with your family, but people who are not your family, maybe you're a bit more modest with. I don't know, because actually until you asked the question, I've not really reflected on that. But no, I mean, I certainly wasn't having conversations with my friends at school along the lines of, my parents are sometimes like naked in the house. Is that normal? Like, that never came up. And obviously my parents wouldn't have been naked while I had friends at home or anything. And
it's not the kind of thing English people talk about, is it?
No. And I think, a bit like I was saying with the way we live our lives now, like it would be wrong to give the impression that my family at home were naked all the time. Absolutely, we weren't. The norm was to be dressed. But, for example, my parents slept naked. They didn't have an ensuite bathroom. So, in the morning, they would get up naked from bed and they would go to the bathroom, the shared bathroom, with no clothes on. That to me was, just what I grew up with thinking was normal. But, having had subsequent conversations with kind of most of my certainly British friends, even now I have friends who are just living with their partner or their husband. And, they would get dressed to walk from, the bed to the bathroom, even when it's just their partner in the house with them. So yeah, I guess that was just the way in which my family was perhaps a little bit more liberated than other people. And I think it was good. As I said, I didn't grow up thinking, oh, we're really strange. We live in this like nudist household.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I guess it just meant that I didn't have those worries and those sort of shameful feelings about nudity kind of ingrained into me from a young age.
Modesty is very interesting because if you think about it, it really makes no sense. Like, some people would go to the bathroom, they would get out of the bathroom after a shower and wear the towel and then just go to the room and then get undressed, but they would be by themselves. Like, there's no one around to see them naked, and they still carry their towel. And I don't know, like, for example, how it's okay for women to use bikinis, but it's not okay for women to use, regular bra, like for them to be wearing a regular bra. Or I don't know, it's just a lot of these social dynamic things don't really make much sense, but no one really questions it. It's just something that we were told to do, and it's easier to follow, the rest of to follow the lead, or to do what everyone else does, than to actually think about it and say, does this make any sense?
Yeah.
But it's interesting what you said about the locker room, because it reminded me that when I was at school, and we came off the sports field, there were just huge banks of showers, probably 20 or 30 showers in a row, no cubicles, and we all showered naked together, and it was completely normal. But now you would never find that in a school.
I don't think so.
Every school has private shower rooms. So whereas I think when I was at school, nudity, it was a single-sex school, of course, but nudity was fairly common in the changing room, or locker room, as you would call it. But that has now gone. Schools are much more modest now because of the fear of sexual assault, and complaints about sexual assault are so great that privacy has grown massively within the school culture, I think. And I think that's not a good thing in terms of, again, you can go through your whole school career now and not really see any of your school friends naked. So how do you know what other people look like or whether you're normal? And that's a problem.
We're exposed to unrealistic beauty standards on
Completely.
social media, on advertising, on television. So it's not like we never see a person that is naked, but we never see a real person that is naked. We never see, people that you interact with on a daily basis. And maybe this would help us have a less distorted image of how naked bodies look like. And maybe my body isn't that terrible after all, as I thought it was.
Yeah, absolutely. The only bodies we're allowed to see are the perfect ones. And of course, and they don't really exist because, as you say, they're all airbrushed. So we all measure ourselves against something which is unattainable because it doesn't actually exist. It's extraordinary.
And the other difficulty is too, in terms of not necessarily people in small amounts of clothing, but people actually naked. I think, again, most people's exposure to people actually naked is through pornography. So it is sexualized. Most people are only seeing naked people in a sexualized way, which reinforces that issue of nudity always being associated with sex.
I completely agree. So how would you guys identify? Do you identify as a naturist, as a nudist, as a nudie? Does it make a difference, or?
I think for us, I think
it doesn't make a difference. You can call us what you like. We really don't mind. We know what we want, which is we want to be able to do things naked when we're comfortable doing things naked, and we want people to be tolerant of that. If you want to call us a nudie or a naturist or a nudist, that's fine. I don't really, to me, there isn't really a difference. There are some militant naturists, some sort of really deep philosophical naturists.
Who would say that by sitting here now clothed, we are not naturists, or the fact that I've admitted that on a normal winter evening, I wear clothes to watch TV, that makes me not a naturist. I'm kind of, I guess we're not really ones for labels. Like if people want to call us, we use the Two Naturist on a boat tag because it worked, it's not because we necessarily kind of,
on a different day, it might easily have been two nudists on a boat.
And it depends sometimes on who we're talking to, because some people, like the terms aren't universally used, and I think some people don't necessarily recognize the word naturist. And
the other trouble is that a lot of people muddle up the word naturist and naturalist.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, in the UK anyway, a naturalist is like someone who goes bird watching or looking at plants.
And actually, we have gone to campsites because they were listed as naturist, but what they meant is they were in nature, and they weren't naturist at all. So maybe nudist is a better word in some ways, because I think it's a word everybody understands.
It depends on what part of the world, right? As far as I have an understanding, I think in Europe, naturist is bigger, and more in the Americas, the word nudist. At least in Mexico, we have the same problem with naturism and naturalism, or naturalist, or whatever.
Naturalism, yeah.
So here, if you say naturist, people associate it with herbs and vitamins and that kind of stuff. So we prefer to use nudists, because despite the fact that they don't know what a nudist is, they understand the nudity part. But it's also really, really nice, because since we don't have that in our culture, people are very willing to have a conversation about it. They're like, oh, so what is that? And then they would ask you questions about it. And since they have nothing to compare it with, whatever you tell them it is, they assume that you're right.
That is the difficult thing with all of these labels. They mean different things to different people. We had quite a funny experience about a year ago, just over a year ago, where we while we were still on the boat, we were actually back in the UK just for a trip to visit some people. And we bumped into a former colleague of ours just in the street, literally walking down the road. And, you know, hi, how are you? That conversation. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, she said, is it true you two are nudists? So somebody had obviously said something and, you know, the word had got round. But I felt like saying to her, well, what do you mean by that? Like, when you're asking that question, what are you asking me? Because I don't know if I say yes, that you're going to understand, you know, you're going to have the right impression, you know, about what I mean by that answer. So it is, the labels are tricky because they all mean different things, I think. You know, for some people, I think there'd be people who would say that sleeping naked made you a naturist or a nudist. And there'd be other people who said that only if you are naked, you know, at every possible moment that the law allows you to be, you know, are you a nudist? So, but yeah, we're not fussy about the labels.
People like to fight about everything, but I think that labels are important when they help you like understand or try to understand someone's reality. I could say that I am a nudist, but I wouldn't consider myself to be too philosophical about it. I like to be naked because I feel comfortable, because I feel it has benefits, because, you know, it feels good, because I want to do it. But do I have philosophical ideas behind it? Maybe, but I don't feel like it's something that I want to push in everybody's face and say, you know, I think everyone should have the ability of choosing, you know, whatever works for them. But yeah, so how did you guys decide to pass from, you know, occasional going to camps naked to ending up buying a boat in the Canary Islands? How did you get to the Canary Islands? What was the story behind that?
EasyJet.
How does anybody get anywhere?
No. So, well, Nick it had been something that
I had sailed quite a lot as a younger man, and we'd had a boat when the children were young. I had a previous marriage, and I'd always wanted to spend more time on a boat, actually live on a boat for a bit, and maybe, you know, do some bigger ocean passages than I'd done before. I'd just done local sailing around Britain or Greece or wherever. And I think I don't know, the time was just right, wasn't it? I wanted to do it before I got too old. It's sort of, Hannah was willing to do it because she didn't want to stay at work.
I needed a break.
She needed a break. And so, you know, it may seem mad, but I think we just woke up one morning and said, why don't we buy a boat?
Yeah, we kind of talked about it loosely as one of those, oh, maybe one day we'll do this. And then I don't know, yeah, we just kind of reached a point where we were like, actually, now's as good a time as any. Like, if we're going to do this, let's just like do it. So
I've always been a bit of a sort of spontaneous person, you know. I just one day I just decided that doing something would be a good thing. Like, you know, many years ago, I decided that I would like to go live in France. So I went off to France and bought an old farm and lived there for 5 years and became a sort of farmer. No, I mean, a very small scale farmer. I worked at the local university to earn some money. But I think life, I think you should fill life with as many opportunities as you can, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, we had the opportunity. We were in a very, very fortunate position in that we had a little bit of money which could enable us to buy a boat, not an expensive one, but buy a boat and go away for a few years. And, you know, we'd rather have those kind of experiences than just retire with lots of money. You know, we'd rather actually do things and experience things, as many different things in life. So I think the boat was just another one of those, really.
And so the Canary Islands, well, that was really because that was where the boat happened to be. The boat that we found that was right for us happened to be in the Canary Islands. I mean, we'd have ended up there anyway at some stage because that's the classic kind of jumping off point from Europe to cross the Atlantic to the Americas. But yeah, so the boat that we bought was there.
And because we were there for a year, and the Canary Islands, I don't know whether you know, you probably do, they're very, very naturist friendly.
I didn't know. No.
They are. It's part of Spain, but it was never. It was never religious. The islands are bare bits of rock in the Atlantic. Well, they're just off the coast of Morocco, really.
They're more Africa, although they belong to Spain.
And so they've always been very poor. They were never colonized in terms of, building big castles and all that sort of thing. And I think perhaps the tolerance to the toleration of nudity there is something to do with the fact the church was never there. They're very unreligious. And you can be naked on any beach in the Canaries. There's absolutely no problem with it at all. And in fact, almost all beaches, apart from the sort of central tourist beaches right outside hotels, which are the ones you wouldn't go to anyway. But all the others are mixed, aren't they?
Yeah, they don't really do kind of naturist beaches and textile beaches, as we call them in the UK. I don't know if that's the same all around the world. Just kind of every beach almost is a free-for-all. As Nick said, if you've got like a real inner city beach, that's kind of, along the main promenade through a city, people don't tend to be naked there. But any kind of, remote beach, it's just a mix. People are clothed or they're not, and that's fine. And everybody's kind of left to their own business, really.
They're all pretty much clothing optional.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I mean that's the kind of ideal that we would really want. It's we don't particularly want everybody to be naked. We do absolutely think it would benefit people to be naked and that they would really enjoy it. But we're not sort of insistent that they are. Mm-hmm. We just want
everybody to
our choice to be tolerated.
Yeah. We don't want everyone to be naked, but I'd like to be naked, and I don't
exactly.
And I want you to have the choice to be. Yeah.
I don't get why I can't go to the store naked. Doesn't make any sense.
You don't want to be in the freezer aisle for too long.
Yeah. Supermarkets in the UK are very much too cold for naturism.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've noticed, that most countries that are bigger on naturist tend to be a lot colder than like Latin American countries, or most of those countries are tropical. They have very nice weather. It's usually hot most of the time. So I don't understand why we can't spend more time naked.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, our experience of leaving the Canaries, which is very naturist friendly, and then spending 33 days crossing the Atlantic and getting to the Caribbean islands, and there, of course, the situation is completely reversed. Nudity is illegal. It's punishable by with a fine or worse, and it's taken very seriously. I mean, you cannot be even topless anywhere.
Yeah, we went to Cuba. We were there for about 2 weeks, and we really wanted to have a naturist experience. We didn't get very lucky, unfortunately. Yeah. And we also noticed that the Cubans would go to the beach wearing shirts and shorts, like not even a bikini. Like they were as dressed as possible.
Yeah. So I went on holiday many years ago to Cuba, and I remember, just with my mom actually, and I remember there was another European lady, I'm not sure what nationality she was, who by the pool took her top off, because in Europe, toplessness is a bit more mainstream, I think it is, in other parts of the world too. And actually she was asked by hotel staff to put her top back on, and they were very polite about it. But they said, here it's not really culturally acceptable, would you mind covering up?
There was one, we found one naturist beach
in Antigua. There's a hotel that had a sort of private beach.
Eden Beach, wasn't it?
Yeah, Eden Beach.
And we went there for the day. It was the other end of the island to where the boat was. So we hired a car and went there. And there were maybe 3 or 4 other people there.
Yeah, nobody there.
That was it. And it was an absolutely beautiful beach. Absolutely beautiful beach. Palm trees, white sand, coral. But no one was there. And I don't know how it came to be a naturist beach.
No, well, I think maybe the reason that it was tolerated was that it was a kind of very end spit of land, that wasn't a kind of thoroughfare through to or from anywhere. So basically nobody could stumble on it by accident. So maybe it was tolerated because of that. Like you had to know it was there and make a special effort to go there. So I guess they figured that it wasn't going to cause anybody any accidental kind of distress or alarm because nobody would come across you. But yeah, it was difficult when we were in the Caribbean. Obviously, when we were on our own boat, it was fine. We could, you know.
And in fact, most sailors are naturists.
Well, certainly the European
They
sailors.
wouldn't call themselves naturists, but it's the only practical way to be on a boat.
Yeah.
So, you know, we spend most of the time on anchor in bays, and we would often have a lot of other boats around, and nudity was very, very common.
Yeah.
But
just for practical reasons, you know, a lot of people shower on their deck because, you know, showering down below is difficult. So,
and it would be mainly the Europeans.
Yeah, it was the Europeans, not really the Americans so much, and obviously, and not the locals at all. But yeah, a lot of French and Germans and British people. I think the people who are living on boats. Cheers. I think the people living on.
You've drunk about half of that bottle.
Well, I like to take little sips at it. It lasts a while. I certainly don't finish it in one conversation. So
save it for a few. But yeah, I think.
I mean, we could often find places to be naturist. The islands are, you know, they tend to be. There's a few little tourist hotspots, but actually most of the Caribbean, particularly if you've got a boat, is completely empty, and it's very easy to find your own beach or go hiking up into the waterfalls and what have you. And you might have seen the pictures on Twitter. You know, it wasn't hard to find places where you could be nude, but there was no social nudity at all.
And we did have to be very much more careful than we would be here. You know, here we would take the attitude, as I said earlier, that, well, if somebody stumbles across us, you know, it's not a big deal. Whereas there, you know, we felt that we had to be really quite certain that we weren't gonna, you know, that people weren't gonna see us or come across us. Because you don't want to get in trouble, but also actually you want to be respectful to other people's cultures. For me, that's the biggest thing. You know, I don't do this to shock people or alarm people or upset people. So, you know, for us, it was really about respecting the culture of our host countries, which is really important.
For all of those who are interested, I forgot to mention this during the introduction. You guys can find their pictures of the adventures and things that they're talking about on Twitter at Two Naturist on one. And I'll leave the links to all the things that we mentioned during this conversation in the description of this video. And I'll also tag them on Twitter when I post this, so you guys can see what we're talking about, what we're referring to. So what's the longest trip that you guys did on the boat? Like the longest time that you spent actually at sea?
The longest trip was the Atlantic crossing, which was 33 days.
So we did Canary Islands to Antigua. We had a relatively small boat, and small boats go slower than bigger boats. We also had a pretty old, we had a very robust but then heavy boat, so also it was a little bit slower than some. We also had just not the best weather, so we got kind of becalmed in the middle, almost literally at the midway point.
For about 4 days.
For about 4 days, we moved hardly anywhere. We were virtually at a standstill. The sea was like a swimming pool. Like there wasn't a ripple on it at all, and just no wind at all. So it was pretty. I mean, other people do take that long, but that was a pretty slow crossing for the Atlantic crossing. But yeah, so that was 33 days at sea.
Wow.
With no stops.
33-day trip, like. How do you pack the food, the water,
it's a big undertaking.
Yeah, I mean,
actually.
You just kind of.
You do a very, very big supermarket shop.
Yeah, or 3 as we did. Yeah. But yeah, we just, I mean, obviously the first thing that you have to think about is making sure that you plan for the worst case scenario. So we had enough water and food for probably about 50 days, you know, in case things had gone wrong. And that was kind of generously, like we'd have survived for much longer than that on what we had, but we could have been you know, relatively comfortable. We'd have been eating boring food, but we'd have been eating enough food that we wouldn't have been hungry for probably 50 days or more, maybe. So a lot of it. And it was just about having a kind of a bit of a plan. So I just did, before we went, I did 4 weeks worth of meal plans.
Anna's very efficient. She gets it all planned out.
After the 4-week point, I figured that all of the kind of fresh food would have run out anyway, because you just can't keep. We didn't have a freezer on the boat. We had a very small fridge, and without a freezer, actually, you know, there's very little that will last more than about 4 weeks. So I figured that by the time, if we were still sailing after 4 weeks, we'd just have to eat like stuff from tins or pasta with pesto or tomato sauce or whatever. So yeah, I literally just, I made meal plans. Breakfast, I just got we got a variety of different things so that we had a bit of interest. But yeah, for our main evening meal, I just kind of did a timetable of what we were going to have and what I'd need for that. And then we bought all of those ingredients. We made sure we had loads of snacks and stuff too, because we had to do night watches, because obviously you can't both go to bed. So we were basically doing 3 hours on and 3 hours off, to make sure that someone was always awake, keeping an eye out. So like in the middle of the night, you need snacks.
You need
to
chocolate.
Keep you going.
Lots of chocolate.
Yeah, I've never eaten so much chocolate and biscuits. But you know, the other really strange thing about it was, I think partly in a weird way, it's quite hard work. Not because actually we were having to do a lot of like heaving of sails and things, but because you're on such an unstable surface all the time, actually just to stay upright, you're working quite hard all the time. You know, you're constantly sort of like this, adjusting to stop yourself falling over. And I think also the weird sleep patterns had an effect. So actually, even though I ate probably 5 chocolate bars a day on top of everything else I would normally eat, we lost so much weight, didn't we? We got to Antigua and we were like 6.
Wow.
It's surprisingly, you'd think it was really sort of peaceful out there, but it's actually surprisingly stressful. I mean, I didn't sleep for the first 4 days, I think, at all, not even for a minute. Because when you're out there, there's nobody can come and help you. You can't call anyone for help. You know, so if anything goes wrong, and if things go wrong on a boat, they go wrong very quickly. You have to be on top of things all the time. So if you'd hear a different noise, you had to go straight away and investigate what it is. Was it something chafing? Is it something that needs repair? So, you know, so it was just constant, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually the most stressful thing I've ever done, I think.
It sounds very mentally challenging. Like after hearing this, I think taking off your clothes, it's not a big deal at all. You probably forget.
I think the thing with it was, like, as you say, it wasn't even that there were that many actual stressful episodes. Like we had a few things.
There were a few,
you know, in a month. There's no few things, but we had no serious issues, thankfully. But I think it's that just that you can never switch off is exhausting, and that you can't stop. Like I remember on about day 8 thinking, I just want to say I'm having a day off. Like I just want to have a day where I lie in bed and watch TV. Like I need a break, but you can't have that. No. And actually after a while, I found the first kind of 10 days the hardest. After that, I think we just sort of settled into a routine, and you become much more used to it and it becomes much more comfortable. But yeah, I think my difficult days were about day 8 to 10, where I was just like, I want a day off. And I remember Nick saying to me at one point, if somebody like brought an island to me and said, you can sort of tie up for the night and have a rest and sort of get on land, get off the boat, and it was £10,000, I would pay it right now for one night.
Maybe not 10,000, but 1,000, definitely.
Would you do it again?
That's how desperate we were.
It was a great experience, but it is quite tough.
So you wouldn't.
And the extraordinary thing is that we live in such a connected world. You know, we're all so connected and 24 hours a day. But you know, out there in the ocean, it's one of the last places where you're totally unconnected. You know, there's There's no Facebook, there's no Twitter, there's no television, there's no radio.
I
there's
mean,
nothing.
you can be connected at a price.
If you have a satellite.
You know, if you have satellite phones, you can get all of those things. But we went a bit more basic.
We went old school.
Is it really, really expensive to have access to that?
It's about, no, it's not that expensive, actually.
I think the handsets are about $1,000.
Yeah.
And then you basically, a bit like on a cell phone, you get a kind of, you can either have a contract for a month or 2 months, which is about...
The download costs are about $35 a minute.
Wow.
US.
Yeah. Or you can buy a kind of contract that gets you unlimited downloads, which are about $500 a month or something.
Yeah, they're very expensive. You can get cheaper contracts where you just get files, like grid files, that are like weather files.
That will send you the weather. But
and just text. But if you try to send or receive a picture, for example, it would be very, very costly.
Maybe
we basically work...
Maybe for an emergency it might be worth it, but then again, you think about it, you're in the middle of the ocean, like finding you is going to be a very big challenge.
Yeah, so what we did have with us, we did have a radio, so anybody that was within about 20 miles we could communicate with, although there weren't very often people within that distance. But we also had a device called an EPIRB, which is effectively, if you activate it, it sends a distress signal and it transmits your position. So basically, whilst we wouldn't have been able to communicate with the rescue services would know that we were in distress and they would have our location. So somebody would be diverted, the closest boat, plane, whatever, would be diverted to come to find us.
And we had two, actually. We had one on the boat and we
yeah.
had one in our life raft. So we did have a life raft. We're not that crazy.
So yeah, if we'd have had to bail off the boat and get in the life raft, we could have been transmitting the position for the life raft too. So, you know, it's not ideal in that you can't have a conversation with anybody to say, this is what's happened and, you know, come and help us, we're really hungry. But nevertheless, somebody still knows that you are in need of emergency assistance and they can track your position.
We would have been picked up in probably between 24 and 48 hours, I think. You know, someone would come and get you.
Okay. Wow.
Probably Venezuelan tankers were mostly what we saw, weren't
Yeah.
they? Venezuelan oil tankers were pretty much the only things that we passed out there. So we'd have ended
It's surprisingly empty out there, actually.
Yeah.
We saw hardly anybody at all on the way across.
I don't know if I'd ever be able to do something like that. I think that goes beyond my levels of crazy. First of all, I get dizzy very, very easily. So I wouldn't be able to survive a few hours, let alone days.
I'm sure you would, Hector. You just, you know, human beings are very adaptable. If you're forced to do something, most people just get on with it.
Yeah.
Let's hope I'm never in the position where I'm forced to do it.
No,
Okay.
this is true.
Fair enough. Probably won't happen.
So during these trips, most of the time, I suppose you guys were undressed. Did you ever come in contact with other boats or other people and maybe saw you guys a little bit weird because you were undressed, or would you put on something?
No, I mean, on the crossing, we were, as soon as it got warm, we were pretty much undressed. But of course, you have to go down into the tropics before it starts to get warm, because out at sea it's a lot colder than it is on land.
And then, of course, you do have the slight difficulty of once you're in the tropics, actually, you kind of sometimes need clothing for sun protection. You know, when you're on a boat all day, actually, you get to the point where, you know, we're quite, you know, pale. We have to cover up after a while. So that can be problematic. But no, I mean, we will have definitely had other boats that probably saw that we were undressed on our boat. But as Nick said earlier, actually, amongst the sailing community, it's not that unusual. I think anybody who's living on a boat is maybe a little bit kind of
nuts,
not quite normal anyway.
At least a bit crazy. So
yeah, you know, and I guess the thing is that there are people who have chosen to live outside like what the norm in society is, simply by going, do you know what, we're going to go and live on a boat. you're already defying a lot of society's kind of norms and expectations.
Yes.
So I think it's perhaps not surprising that a lot of the people who live that way are also perhaps a little bit more liberated about things like nudity.
There's a lot more nudity in the cruiser population than there is in the population generally.
Yeah, I've seen many more people naked on boats than I have in my otherwise everyday life. But it's partly a practical thing.
When did you guys decide to start sharing your experience online? How did you come to that, conclusion that you wanted to do that?
Well, I suppose we were probably from the beginning sharing it on our, with friends and family via our regular personal social media. Obviously we moved away from home. We were going on an adventure, so our friends and our family wanted to be able to keep up with that. It wasn't a great decision. We didn't sit down and go, do you know what, Hannah, let's share our nudity online. Yeah, it's one of those things that
we never imagined it would get to where it is now. I mean, we didn't think about that at all. Did we?
No, I think we just, I think we touched on in the short film that we made for you once before, that I think we just, we were spending more and more of our time in the Canary Islands, more of our leisure time naked. So we naturally had photographs of us just doing our stuff naked, enjoying our time on the beach. And I guess we just had that thing of, it seems a real shame that we can't do anything with these. We've got some photos of some really beautiful places, and it would be nice to be able to share those. So I think, perhaps without a huge amount of thought and consideration, we just sort of kind of for a bit of fun just set up an Instagram, Two Naturist on a boat account, which just, much to our surprise, kind of took off quite quickly, but then also was shut down quite quickly.
I mean, I think when we started, we hadn't really given it any thought, so we hadn't really appreciated that there were these rules about nudity on Instagram, or indeed on any platform. Mm-hmm. And I think we probably, quite early on, there was a picture that was taken down, and then we looked into the rules, and we found there were all these rules about, no nipples and all these other rules. So we did stick to the rules, didn't we? We were actually really careful to stick to the rules, and it started to grow really quickly.
And then as soon as we started to grow, I guess we somehow came more to Instagram's attention. And they just, from your experiences on social media platforms, we just more and more, we'd have pictures that were blocked, and then we'd appeal, and straight away they'd be like, oh yeah, no, that picture's fine, it doesn't breach community guidelines. And then one day, it's actually while we were doing a bit of a European road trip, our account just got taken down overnight. Just went, like everything gone.
And I actually contacted a friend of mine
who works
for Instagram, and I said, our account's been shut down. And she said, oh, give me the details, I'll look into it. And then we were contacted by somebody who said, you haven't broken any rules, and we'll reinstate you. But in fact, it didn't happen, did it? After a couple of days, it still hadn't happened. And I think at that point, we just thought, what is the point in putting the effort into building something if overnight it can just be deleted? And it's not as though we weren't earning money from it. We would never have earned money from it, but it's still, it's still quite a lot of investment in terms of time and thinking about what you're going to photograph, etc., etc. And so we just decided that we wouldn't continue with Instagram and would move to Twitter.
Yeah, and I think there was the practical side of, this is really irritating that we've lost this work, etc., etc. But also it did just get us thinking about the fact that we were pretty appalled by the things that are okay on Instagram and the things that weren't, and actually just thought, I don't think we want to be a part of this platform. I mean, that's not to, I do still use some of these social media platforms for my personal stuff.
Yeah.
But we just kind of thought, in relation to this, actually, we don't really agree with the approach that they take. There are images on lots of platforms that are plainly pornographic, but they have blurred out, certain parts. and that's allowed, yet a completely natural, non-sexualized image of, you know, of naked people without the relevant bits blurred out is somehow kind of abhorrent. And we just, you know, we just took the view that we didn't really like the attitude of these social media platforms.
It did really make us think, didn't it? And seeing the contradiction in society about particularly violence, actually, because we are really against the kind of communal garden violence we see in society. On those social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook, you know, there is lots of images of violence, which are absolutely fine. For some reason, they have become part of normal society. I mean, you can watch television in England and you can switch on the TV in the evening and you can see someone's throat being cut with a knife and blood going everywhere and axes going into people's heads. And this somehow has become completely normal. And you don't call them video games anymore, do you? They're sort of gaming things. You know, people are blowing people up and gunning them down and that sort of thing. And all those things have been completely normalized. And yet, which are all illegal, of course, but something completely legal and something that all of us have, the naked body, has somehow become more sinful than blowing somebody up with a hand grenade. And I simply don't understand how society has got to this appalling position.
Yeah, censorship is pretty arbitrary, and it's ridiculous, as you mentioned, how something so normal as a human body is systematically censored, blocked, shut down. And there's so much effort and resources going into this because these softwares that they use, it's pretty sophisticated. But then again, other things like violence is actually glorified and celebrated.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's something, it blows my mind. I don't understand, as you mentioned, how we got to this point. So I also see that you guys have a blog. What started first, the Instagram account or the blog?
The Instagram account came first. And then the blog was, I think, it was actually after Instagram got deleted, because it was only really after Instagram got deleted that we began to think about these issues. And so I think thinking about the issues led us to doing the blog. And we haven't blogged that much, actually, but we've done maybe like 5 or 6 pieces. If they come into our heads, you know, we get a thing. Sometimes we just start thinking about a particular topic and we think, you know, that we just want to put our thoughts down on paper. So that's, well, not paper, of course.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, it's not something that we necessarily set out to write a blog so much as occasionally we felt we've had things that we wanted to say. And, you know, the however many characters you get on Twitter doesn't allow you always to do that. So no.
Just don't blow the smoke in our direction. Did you get that while you were in Cuba?
No. Mexico has a part called San Andres well, I'll pronounce it in Spanish. I don't know how to make the pronunciation in English, but it's in Veracruz, where we produce a lot of tobacco. I think it's a similar quality. I wouldn't say it's as good as Cuban, but it's similar quality, but it's a fraction of the price. So I prefer to smoke Mexican tobacco. It's cheaper and it tastes almost as good.
And you're still supporting your local economy.
It looks magnificent.
It's actually
you look like a don.
It's a Churchill size.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill.
Really? I didn't know there was a Churchill size. That's fantastic.
It's actually one of the big ones, because if you remember, he would smoke really, really big cigars.
Yeah.
So they named that size after him.
Okay. So the blog.
You guys were taken down from Instagram, and that got you thinking about other platforms, and you started a blog. And how did you come across Twitter? Were you already familiar with Twitter being more flexible with its community guidelines, or?
No, we weren't actually. We didn't use Twitter at all.
I think you had a really historic account.
I had
that
a
you
very
didn't
old account,
use
which
much.
I didn't use. And we didn't want to go back on Instagram or Facebook, but we wanted to carry it on. And I must have looked at Twitter, and I looked at the community guidelines there, and clearly it was much more adult, can I put it that way? They seem much more sensible about censorship. Actually, there is very little censorship, I think, on Twitter. There's certainly lots of pornography, and certainly if you're a pervert, Twitter is definitely where you want to be, from a sort of open source point of view. But Twitter was clearly a platform that would allow us to do what we wanted to do, which is what you see on Two Naturist on a boat. So we moved there, and actually I'm quite happy with Twitter, really. I think it's I quite like the format of Twitter. I like the fact that Twitter is more of a conversation. I like that it's not so much the playground of influencers. The influencers on Twitter are sort of political influencers more than, buy this, I don't know, this jersey or whatever it is. So I thought it was a more interesting place, Twitter. I think you get a more interesting debate on Twitter. And so there we are.
Yeah, that has been my experience. I originally started off, creating content, promoting things on Facebook. I never really liked Instagram because I feel like there's a very artificial vibe. I think what characterizes Instagram are all the filters that are part of this unrealistic beauty standard, and not really loving and accepting yourself as you are, and also creating like this fake image of your lifestyle. So I personally never really identified with that, and I never really liked Instagram, but I do see Instagram being a very powerful platform if you're not systematically shut down. For example, Nick and Lynn's had a very big Instagram account that was also taken out from one day to another with no explanation, and they couldn't get it back. I was more on YouTube. The reason that I decided YouTube was because I've noticed that video format was very powerful. For example, pictures are very easily shared. I think a picture can have a very big reach, but the impact of a picture is very limited because it's something that one person sees, and then they go to the next and the next and the next and the next. And in a minute, they forgot, or it doesn't really translate to action. And I think that YouTube was really good on that, because I build a relationship with people that watched my videos, and they were very aware of what was going on. And I think that that leads them a little bit more to action, to actually wanting to try the experience. And it's also easier. I noticed that it was easier to convey the idea of what naturism was by showing people what it was versus sitting down and talking about it. I had very long conversations for a very long time with people, and I would tell them how great it was. And it seems that people understand what a pool party is, but as soon as you say it's a naked pool party, they just have no idea what you're talking about. So having that reference and people seeing how the events were and things that were taking place, I think it really helped people, at least here in Guadalajara, to want to participate. And it all started from an advertising standpoint, because we were in a campaign that we wanted to open a landed club here in Guadalajara, because in Mexico, there's no such thing as landed clubs or campgrounds or anything like that as they have in the rest of the world. We wanted to try something like that. And that's what got me into it. But as soon as I lost my YouTube channel, I decided that I wanted to give Twitter a shot. And what I really loved about it was how big and solid the community is. Maybe not big in millions, but it's a lot of people that dedicate a lot of their time into discussing, sharing, and I think a lot of collaborations and just a lot of things are done on Twitter. and I really like that.
Mm.
I see you guys
Yeah.
started in 2018. Is that about correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, that
must
would be
yeah.
that would be right. Yeah.
So the Instagram probably started in about maybe April 2018. The Twitter would have been
July, August.
no, well,
August.
Instagram got shut down in August, so it might have been September or October.
According to your Twitter,
Ooh,
I have
yeah.
opened up here, it's July 2018.
Oh, you're right. Gosh. Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought there'd been a bit of a gap between Instagram and Twitter, but perhaps there wasn't much.
So,
because I remember
you guys
we
consider
drove.
yourself as naturist promoters, or is it just a hobby that you guys like to share? Like someone who likes to play bowling and just occasionally shares a couple of bowling pictures.
No, I think we do see ourselves as promoters, because we want to be promoters, because we think it's such a great lifestyle, and we think it just, it does improve people's lives, because it improves their attitudes, particularly to themselves and to others around them. And so we have, since we started Twitter, I think, become more promoters. We see ourselves more as promoters now than we did perhaps on Instagram, when we were just having a bit of fun. But being shut down on Instagram, as I said before, is the thing that really tipped us into being promoters, I suppose. And so we want to encourage other people to experience what we're experiencing. And I think in a sort of highly commoditized world, the great thing about naturism is it's free. It's open to anyone. You don't need any money. You don't need any qualifications. You need nothing. All you need to do is to be brave enough to take your clothes off. That's all that's required. And we genuinely think that a lot of benefits flow from that.
I partially agree with that. I do think that taking your clothes off is free, but if you want it in an organized, safe area with a lot of other people and so on, the more layers that you add to it, the more work and costs are associated. And I think that sometimes the idea that taking your clothes off is free, why should you charge for a service, can be a little bit ridiculous, because we understand that, I don't know, maybe going to the beach is free, but if you want to stay at a hotel, if you want, certain accommodation.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I don't have any problem with that. If people are providing a service, of course. I mean, we go to hotels or campgrounds, and of course, you would expect to pay for that. You're receiving a service, but I think what I'm trying to say is that you can get many of the psychological benefits of naturism simply by going to your local beach or to your local lake or whatever it is.
Or spending time.
And I like that fact,
Yeah.
Sorry?
So spending time nude at home, or, taking a while after you get out the shower or before you go into the shower, doing homework, working, especially during the quarantine. A lot of people started working from home, and it became like a trend or a meme. And I feel like, I don't know, I think there's so many things that are going on in the world that us naturists could take advantage of in order to start a conversation. But we don't seem to be that great at taking advantage of these memes, because things happen, and we don't really lead the way. For example, Spencer Tunick started a movement with artists on Instagram and Facebook and so on, because they were taking down his work and other artists' work. And I think those are one of those things that maybe naturism as an organized movement should hop on and, start being part of that conversation. What is the difference between a sexualized naked image, or what is the difference between a casual, someone, skinny dipping or whatever? But it's going to be very hard for the algorithms to identify the difference between something that is erotic and something that is not. So I think that's why they're just so restrictive and just decide to take all nudity away.
I think that's right. That's right. Although the rules are very contradictory at the moment, because on Instagram, for example, as Hannah was saying, if you just cover the nipples with a little blob, tiny little blob, you can still have a highly sexualized photograph,
Mm-hmm.
but with these little blobs, and that's absolutely fine. So, I mean, as you say, the algorithm is absolutely hopeless at the moment. But it shouldn't be beyond the wit of tech platforms these days, I would have thought, to begin to build an algorithm which could have a better go at discriminating between sexualized and not sexualized images than they do at the moment.
I think maybe what Twitter does is a really good strategy. The moment that you set up the settings of your account, you can decide whether you want to be exposed to adult sensitive content or not. And
Yeah.
sometimes when someone posts something, especially like, for example, my account is set up as an adult account because, you know, I share naked pictures of myself. And if you have this setting, whenever someone else gets in contact with one of my posts, it's like blurred out, and they have to select that they agree with the sensitive content. That it's probably impractical and probably limits the growth of what we're doing, but it gives the person a choice whether they want to be exposed to that or not. And I feel that that's a better way to handle it than the approach that Facebook or Instagram or now YouTube is getting, that it's like, no, we're going to protect you and we want to decide for you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's wrong.
Yeah, well, that's why I describe Twitter as a more adult site. It just seems to be, the management of Twitter seems a bit more grown up than the management of the other platforms, which is very sort of paternalistic.
Yes. And that's scary that these platforms feel like they have the authority to decide what people consume. And I honestly, I mean, I've had a really negative experience with censorship over the years, but I'm convinced that censoring something, instead of making it weaker, it actually makes it stronger, but for the wrong reasons. I feel that the reason why the human body is so stigmatized is because we aren't exposed to it on a regular basis. If we were exposed to it, we wouldn't think that it was negative in nature, that it was pornographic in nature, that it was so. And the thing is, people are still consuming pornography. It's not like being this restrictive is avoiding people from consuming it. I think this actually makes pornography more appealing and more interesting. So in a way, they're trying to protect us, but they're actually making stronger the wrong version of nudity.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
breaking out of that idea is very complicated because we're constantly reinforced that nudity is wrong. So there can't be a context where nudity is normal or okay because of this. So I think in a way they're defending the idea that nudity is wrong, and this defense is only going to continue to cause all the negative effects that we've talked about.
Yeah, well, I think that's why we run our account in the way we do. So what we want to do is just expose people to normal adults doing normal things naked, because that hopefully goes some way towards people seeing normal bodies in a non-sexualized situation. And it's, our account is a little bit of sort of exposure therapy, I suppose.
Yes, I agree with that.
It's also...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Karen. I was just going to say, it's also perhaps part of the reason that we're not tempted to go on platforms like Patreon and, is it Fans Only? What's it called?
I don't know, Fans Only.
Fans Only or something like that. OnlyFans. Is a little bit, and that I don't mean this as a criticism of lots of our fellow Twitter naturists who do use those platforms, but I suppose for us it's a little bit on the lines of what you just said, of putting photos behind a paywall. To us feels a little bit like censorship, and like saying, well, we've got something to hide, but if you pay us, we'll show it to you. Like, it almost feels a little bit like, by doing that, we are commoditizing our bodies, and therefore kind of somehow reinforcing that censorship, that idea that we're doing something a little bit naughty, or, you know, that we've got something to hide. And so that's our own personal reason for kind of avoiding some of those platforms. And as I say, I don't mean that as any judgment on the people who have their own reasons for using those platforms, particularly people who have a brand and are trying to make a career out of what they're doing. It's a completely different thing.
Like Nick and Lynn's, they're providing a service. You know, they provide, you know, reviews, for example, on naturist spaces. Well, that's a service which it's right that people should be paying for. But we're not providing that kind of service. We don't really provide a service.
I think it really depends on how you approach the situation. For example, if you build an account to attract clients to see you naked because you're not sharing your image naked, you know, you're censoring yourself, and then you're saying, if you want to see me uncensored, go to this website. That's definitely commoditizing or selling your nudes. But if it's provided in a sense where you're not selling nudity itself, but you're more like providing the service, or you're you know, providing the ability to support a cause, I find it a bit different. For example, and I can share my experience when I started on YouTube. After a year or so of starting my YouTube channel, I was in a very difficult financial situation. I loved what I was doing, but I wasn't financially capable of keeping it going. And I didn't want to conform to a regular job because I didn't like the options that I had. So I had already built a medium-sized platform, and I decided that it might be worth a try to see if I could monetize it. And I tried it at the beginning, doing a little bit of this first strategy that we talked about, because one, I didn't know better, and two, I was systematically my videos were taken down, so I needed to censor them. I just decided that if I was going to provide the ability for someone to support me, to do it in an uncensored way, because I didn't have the problem that those videos would be taken down. But I quickly learned that didn't feel right. I didn't like that at all. So when I found out how the YouTube algorithm worked, I changed my strategy a little bit, and it was the regular videos that I was already uploading to YouTube. Those were not censored, but I provided additional context or other information that was going on more like behind the scenes. And that would be behind a paid wall that was Patreon. And this strategy got a little bit better when I moved on to Twitter, because Twitter doesn't have a long format video formats. So I'm only able to share videos for 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So what did I end up doing? I ended up doing like little trailers. And since my audience is already accustomed to videos, I decided that I can't share those videos on any other platforms. I tried to do it on Vimeo. Vimeo said I was generating too much traffic. They have an unlimited policy.
How can you generate too much traffic? I thought that's what they wanted.
I mean, I think it's BS, because I bought an unlimited bandwidth program, and I paid about almost $200 for it for a year. It gives me access to 20 gigabytes a month. I think I only upload maybe about 3 to 5 gigabytes a month. But despite that, they were saying that I was abusing the use of their bandwidth. I was exceeding it. And for me, this was ridiculous, because I clearly read where it said unlimited. But if I went up to the next level, that is 3 times more expensive, then I would actually have unlimited. But if they didn't deliver the unlimited in the first package that I bought, why would I believe that they were going to deliver it in the second package?
Yeah, of course.
But what I decided to do, instead of paying $600 to have my videos online, was to take off all my videos from the public viewing and just simply share them on my Patreon. So the way that I handle it is, if you want to see me naked, you could just follow me on Twitter, and you'll see me naked all the time. If you're interested in supporting what I do, which is not only sharing naked pictures on Twitter, but also promoting it, you know, starting projects like the podcast, doing things with the community and so on. If you're interested in supporting that, you can become a Patreon. And as added benefits, depending on the tier, is whether you have access to the full videos or you have access to exclusive videos. That's basically me telling them what happened during the month, or once a week we have a conversation with Patreons. That's another category. So in a way, I don't think I'm providing a service, and I don't think anyone should pay me to do what I do. But if people want to, they can.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to send us money, are we okay with that? Yeah, we're okay with that.
But yeah, I mean, exactly, that kind of format makes perfect sense. And that's why I sort of qualified, when I started, saying that we don't mean that as any criticism of people who are using those platforms in a really valid and useful way. But as I say, I think just for us and the way that we do things, it would seem a little bit like all we were doing was saying, well, pay us money if you want to see us naked. And that didn't sit right.
And we
because of this idea of the kind of censorship in a way.
But also, I think if people are paying for something, well, if they were going to pay us, I think they'd pay us because they want to see more. And I'm not sure what that more would be, but I have a pretty good idea.
Have you guys considered naked legal services?
Well, I'm not sure the Law Society would be very happy about that, but I'd be quite content to do it.
We were having a conversation the other day. So do you know what I mean by the TV show Gogglebox?
No.
Okay, because I wasn't sure. I know it's a British thing, but sometimes TV shows get like exported and they get around. So basically, it's a really weird concept, but it's really popular in the UK. We don't actually watch it, but it's basically a TV show, reality TV, of people watching TV. So it follows, every series has a group of maybe 5 different households, and they show them stuff on TV, usually things that are a bit controversial. And it just films people's like reactions to what they're watching and the dialogue and the interactions between the family members. As I say, it sounds like a really weird concept, and it is, but it obviously kind of works because it's a really popular show. Yeah. And we were joking the other day saying, should we write to Gogglebox
Hannah was joking. It wasn't my idea.
We'll be your first naked Gogglebox family, and we'll do exactly what everybody else does, but we'll do it naked. Yeah. That would be kind of fun. Gogglebox hasn't seen a naked family before.
Yeah, I'd do that.
And
it's a weird show.
It also has a lot to do with us being, I don't know if the word deprived is correct, but we've been marginalized as creators, as promoters. Like, people forget that social media platforms are businesses, and the creators that are on these platforms are able to dedicate all the time, all the resources that they do to the creation of content because they have a way to monetize it. Generally, that has to do through ads, through, for example, YouTube sells publicity to companies and gives them a part of the profit, or they can have collaborations with other brands and things like that. But as outcasts, we don't have access to that. And it's funny because we're not the porn industry. Porn industry is highly like rich and successful.
Yeah.
And the regular industry is also rich and successful, but we're like the ugly duckling. We don't fit in any of these, so we don't have access to all of these funds. And unfortunately, that means that we depend on more of the user donation model than other ways of monetizing.
Yeah, I think the issues are twofold, really. As you say, firstly, it's kind of being this slightly marginalized section of society, but also, that kind of, well, do brands want to associate with that because it's potentially a bit taboo? But there's also the other issue of, what are you going to sell? Instagram influencers sell clothing, for example. If you're naked, what is it that you can sell? Like sun lotion?
I think this
you
is
could
true.
sell towels. You could sell jewelry.
Yeah.
You could
Beach
sell
ball.
services like traveling or commodities or housing.
But it's
You're right. We could do that, but there is no historical culture of naturists doing that sort of thing.
You could start a trend.
And to be sure, if you could easily commoditize naturism, the platforms would be quite happy with us because, you know, the platforms, as you said, they're businesses, they're there to sell. And if we were selling, we would be much more interesting to them. But, you know, we're not selling. Perhaps we should be. I don't disagree with that, but what is it I'm going to sell? Sun cream.
And towels, yeah.
And towels.
So what happened to the boat? I heard you guys unfortunately had to sell it. What's the story behind that?
We didn't have to sell. We chose to sell.
Okay.
It really we were down at the bottom of the island chain when COVID started to rear its ugly head, and we were lucky actually because we had decided that we were going to take a break from the boat and do a cycling trip. We were going to cycle from Miami up to New York. So we'd hauled the boat out for a time and put it on the hard, as we say. That's putting it on the land. And just as we did that, COVID appeared, and the whole world, as you remember, quickly begun to shut down. And we were lucky, actually. We managed to get out of Grenada. We got one of the last flights out. We had to go to New York because it was the only place we could get to. But having got there, we really decided that sailing was just going to be far too difficult in the next few months, which indeed it is. It's impossible at the moment because you have to. Before you could literally just pull up your anchor, go to the next island, book in, go to customs, get your stamps and everything, and go and have a beer. Now you have to give advance warning. You have to get a slot, and then when you arrive on the island, off the island, you have to drop the hook, the anchor. You have to stay on the boat for 14 days. You're not allowed ashore at all.
Violated.
Yeah, and so it's really made cruising impossible, and we reckoned it was going to be impossible for at least a year, maybe more. And a boat is a big draw on resources. They're very expensive to maintain, and it simply wasn't worth maintaining it when we couldn't really use it. So we sold it.
And we'd sort of, to some extent, we really enjoy travel and we intend to do more traveling. But we'd sort of reached a point where we kind of thought, the sailing thing, we've done that. We got out of this what we wanted to get out of it. In a way, kind of time to move on to the next stage of life. We never set off on the trip with the intention that we would live on a boat forever. This for us was an adventure. It was a trip. It wasn't the rest of our life. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the combination of just everything that we'd achieved so far and then COVID just made it feel kind of like the right time to stop.
How does it feel to be back at home after being at sea, traveling and all that for was it
actually good?
The bed is really comfortable.
You don't have to rock.
Yeah, it stays in one place because you can't really have a double bed at sea because you just roll into each other. That's just, it doesn't work at all. And so, being on a boat like ours is really like permanent camping. It's really, really uncomfortable. I know people think it's a glamorous lifestyle,
but we were not.
It isn't.
We weren't on a luxurious yacht. We were on a smallish boat, and it's like being in a caravan, but that moves around.
Yeah. No hot water. Very little electricity.
Yeah.
No flush toilets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just
I think you guys
basic.
shared a picture cleaning or repairing the toilet or something.
Oh yeah, probably. That was a fairly regular
like...
job. Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah,
yeah, basically it's the kind of just fun, like the basic stuff of life is like going back 100 years living on a boat. I think everything's just kind of hard work, and things like laundry. We have no laundry facilities, so you either have to wash everything by hand or you have to go down to laundrettes and all these. Yeah, exactly. All these things are things that I guess we take for granted and are really lucky to have. But you know, when you grow up with all these really easy, convenient things like running water, showers, flush toilets, laundry, it's kind of quite, you know, for living without them for a long time gets a little bit wearing.
It's nice to go back to, you know, regular.
Yeah, just kind of regular life.
And it makes you much more grateful for what we have. I mean, you never really think about what you have, but when you've been on a boat for 3 years, and you come back to this, you think, this life really is luxurious, you know, and you don't need much on land to still have a much more luxurious life than you get at sea.
Yeah, I think the kind of water situation I am now taking for granted again. But my washing machine and my bed, still every day, I'm like, this is amazing. Like I make my clothes dirty, I can wash them straight away.
And hot showers.
Hot showers. Oh gosh, sorry, I've just kicked them.
Hot showers. But yeah, so I think, you know, we've probably done that adventure, but we've got some more plans.
Yeah.
Do you plan on going back once COVID is over?
We plan to. We've got a sort of embryonic plan to maybe cycle, maybe quite a long way down towards maybe the Black Sea, and then who knows?
Yeah, sort of cycle through Europe.
So you trade the boat for a bicycle.
Yeah. Is that sensible?
It's going to be harder to do that naked, though.
Yeah, a bit chafy.
On a bike.
Bit chafy, yeah. I don't know. I think we could get some good pictures on a bicycle.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at the moment, you know, we've got to earn some money.
Yeah, we've got to earn some money, and
we're enjoying.
And it's impossible anyway. We can't travel, and you know, there's going to be at least another 8 months, I guess, before people are, you know, at the earliest, before people are going to be able to travel, and more likely it's going to be a year or more.
What are you doing?
And it's nice actually to be home with, well, I mean, not that we're seeing much of them in lockdown and all this kind of thing, but to be home with family and friends again, or at least the prospect that in a few months we might be able to see our friends.
Yeah, we haven't actually seen anyone since we got back.
I mean, we've seen a few people because the rules in the UK, I mean, we've just today come out of another lockdown. But we've kind of been in various stages of lockdown. So when we first came back, everything was closed. We were in proper lockdown.
But we're still not allowed to see friends.
But then it relaxed for a little while where you could see you could mix with one other household. So we were able to see a few people and family and things like that. But yeah, there's certainly been no parties with our friends since we've been back or anything like that. So
yeah, so we need to stay here. We need to stay here long enough to have the parties, don't we?
Yeah.
Before you hit the sea or the bike or whatever you guys.
Or the bike, or the mountains or whatever.
But also
what are you doing in the
vans.
meantime? What's going on in the meantime that everything is being, you know, the world is solving this mess?
Well, when we went to New York, as we said, when we got out of Grenada, and then we were stuck in New York for 10 weeks, which was great actually. We had a house, we borrowed a house, we were very lucky.
Yeah, fortunately we knew somebody who had a spare house, as you do.
Just by Washington Square, so we had 10 weeks there, which was absolutely beautiful actually. And New York was completely empty, it was glorious. And we both wrote books while we were there, because we thought, what can we do? Everything's closed, and so we decided we'd write a book each. So
this house that we were staying in, because it was a vacant house, it had no TV, no Wi-Fi. Like it was a beautiful house in an amazing place. But when we were in the house, and bearing in mind it was lockdown, so we couldn't really go out of the house much, there was nothing. Like we used to have to go to the supermarket to download stuff to kind of watch on an iPad in the evening or whatever. So we wrote books just to pass the time.
So we're just,
but not serious books, you know, just silly stories really.
You never know, it could be the big time. Probably not. But we just sort of finished those off. Hannah's doing some work.
I started work. Actually, 3 months now I've been back at work.
From home.
From her, yeah. So most businesses in the UK, it's kind of an approach because of COVID of if you can work from home, they're encouraging people to do that, you know, to obviously stop the spread. So yeah, I was lucky that I was able to go back and work for a team I'd previously worked with, or the team I was working with just before we left to go on our boat trip. So yeah, I sit here all day and I work.
Well, there's definitely a lot of work to do right now when it comes to legal services of the health providers and all that.
Yeah, we're pretty busy. There's a lot of stuff going on with COVID, and actually, you know, my employer is going to be heavily involved in rolling out the vaccination programs over the next month and stuff as well. So yeah, keeping us busy.
So during this time, when did you guys, or first of all, what is your opinion on naturist federations, if you have an opinion about them?
Well, when we came back and we realised we were going to be in the UK for a time, we did actually join British Naturism. I actually think they're a great, I don't know whether they're a federation, or should I call them a federation? They're a great organisation. They've done some really good campaigning in the UK, and they've got some really good people. And they, I think, have been responsible for the change that we've seen in the attitude towards naturism from the authorities. So the police, for example, now are really quite well trained in how to deal with complaints about nudity, public nudity, and almost all of that education has actually come from British Naturism.
Wow.
And so they're a very effective organisation. So we wanted to support them by joining them. And we have, I mean, unfortunately, we've only been to one of their events, actually events where, you know, live events, which was a camping trip we did to Sunfolk, which is one of their summer camping spots, which was fantastic. But sadly, the other events that we'd signed up for to go to Old House, they've all been cancelled because of COVID.
Yeah.
But I mean, hopefully, when COVID is over, we would like to do a lot more British Naturism events, because we've met some really nice people through there, and they're very genuine people. They're very passionate about naturism, and they've done a lot in the UK. So that's our only experience of being a member of an organisation. It's been a good experience, but I know that there is a lot of politics, as there is in every area of life.
Although we only really learnt this recently, didn't we? So we attended, you know, British Naturism did those events.
The
I know you were at
Global Forum.
some of those events too. We saw you there, but there was the event with a lot of chat about the international, what are they called, INF?
The INF, I think.
You know, there was lots of chat about a lot of the problems and the politics, which was all actually brand new to us. So
the next conversation that I'm going to have is going to be about a very questionable 2016 election at the INF, and a lot of things that they're doing now.
There were a lot of questionable 2016 elections.
No, they weren't.
Well,
oh yeah, the 2016 one, yeah.
Yes, and the way that they're handling, or the way that they're taking advantage of COVID, is also very questionable, and that's something that I'd like to talk about. I mean, I think one of the problems with why most of these federations, British Naturism is definitely an example of, you can have a successful modern institution that works with the authorities, that is active on social media, that, you know, does something to promote our lifestyle. But most of the federations are not that way. And the reason why they're not that way is because no one really knows what's going on. No one really, you know, questions or does anything about it. And I think the first step that we need to take is to start conversations, so people are aware of what's going on, and if they want to, they could decide to, you know, get more involved. At the end of the day, I think this is going to benefit us all. If people know what's going on, they might feel more inclined to be a part of those institutions and make the changes that they want. Because I, for example, have always been very active in naturism, and I've never been the type of person that wants someone else to do something. But I feel like if there's people like me who want to do things, these institutions should have opportunities for people to enter in these leadership positions. And also a big problem with these federations is that there's a lack of continuity. The leaders of these institutions have been the leaders for the last 30 years, and they have no sense of understanding how the world has evolved and all the opportunities that they're missing out on. But then again, they complain that young people are not interested in naturism, which I honestly don't think is true.
No, I don't think it's true either. In fact, in England, there seems to be quite an interest just now in naturism.
Yeah, and maybe not in the really formal, let's join a club and be naturists, but definitely kind of skinny dipping, for example, at the moment is having a bit of a moment in the UK.
And I think, we before we went away and we were working as lawyers, we found there was a naturist club in Oxford. And we thought we might join, but we found it extremely difficult. They were difficult to contact, and then they were very wary. And
like they wouldn't even tell us where the club was until we kind of committed to kind of becoming members. And it's like, well,
then they had to meet us before they would consider whether we should become members. And it didn't feel very welcoming.
No.
And we never ended up with a club, so I don't want to, say that I don't want to criticize them, other than to say that as people who were sort of interested in joining, we didn't feel they were very open with us.
No.
Which didn't feel very welcoming.
Most of these clubs build like huge walls where people, like you mentioned, don't have the ability to participate if they want to. But I mean, we have a local club, and we had to come up with an integration process, especially because naturism isn't a thing in Mexico, and it's very easy for someone to associate it with the wrong concept, and not because it's wrong, but because it's not what we offer. So we want to make sure that people that go to our events know exactly what they're getting themselves into. So I understand that some businesses have process that people have to follow, but more than that, it's just they haven't entered the 21st century. They know nothing about social media. They know nothing about censorship and a lot of these things that I feel that could bring value. And it's not only the clubs, it's also some federations are against institutions or organizations that are seeking to get nude beaches because they feel like they're not real naturists, or at least that's something that I heard that was commented during one of the conferences, that it was weird people that like to get naked at the beach and actual naturists that are members of the federation, which is it's
crazy.
It's crazy.
Just,
yes.
Yeah.
So for us, that's not what this is about. It's about inclusiveness and letting people be free to do what they want to do. And actually, do you know what? How do you create a naturist without letting people first try being naked on a beach? You kind of have to allow that entry level into it for people to get comfortable with it, to then decide, oh, maybe I do want to make this a bigger part of my life. So yeah, that's to us is a kind of crazy approach.
I don't think that's probably the case in England, but it is the case in other countries. Have you guys participated in any of the British naturism projects that they have going on, like promoting naturism to women or certain demographics or anything like that?
So I participated in one of Donna's, is it Donna?
Donna, yeah.
Yeah.
Donna
Suddenly
Fox.
thought, I'm not modelling her, it was someone else. Yeah, so Donna, they in the early stages, back in kind of June, July, British Naturism were doing sort of Sunday coffee mornings over Zoom. But everybody kind of had a chat over coffee, and they did breakout rooms and this kind of thing. And Donna did a kind of women's event, kind of, trying to promote naturism. And I was on the sort of panel of that. But we haven't done a huge amount. And we sort of often have the thoughts that we probably should do more.
And actually, we would like to do more. But we happen to have come back at a time where everything's so restricted, there really isn't very much going on.
Yeah.
That's the trouble. There's things going on over Zoom and what have you, but you know, we're much more the kind of people who like to meet people face to face and go to events and that sort of thing. And so there hasn't really been that opportunity since we come back because of the pandemic.
I think, and yeah, we've only been members of British Naturism, what, 4 months, something like that. You know, it is all quite new. The other thing is too, I think, which might sound a bit funny given how people know us, is I don't think we're not like brilliant people at putting ourselves forward for things. I think in the whole of our lives, like, not that we're necessarily shy.
We're very British.
But yeah, maybe it is partly a cultural thing. You know, British people are a little bit more reserved, I think. So if people approach us and ask us to do things, you know, we're really happy to help. But I don't think we're necessarily people who are like pushing to be involved in things. And that's not because necessarily like we're lazy or we can't be bothered, but it's just that kind of, oh, well, we don't want to interfere. We don't want to impose ourselves on people. You know, I think that's just kind of the attitude that we have.
It's very British, not wanting to appear pushy. It's a very English thing.
Exactly. So I think it's, anybody who's asked us to be involved in things, it's like, actually, yeah, great, we'll do whatever we can to help. But we're not necessarily going to be like, hey, let us be on your panel and let us organize an event for you. Because I think we're not that kind of forward and that, you know, extroverts.
I've never asked anyone to put me on their panel, but it's more like, you're right. It has to do with, I don't know. I think I've always been very proactive when it comes to, for me, when I first started in naturism in Guadalajara, there was really nothing that was actually naturist. We had a World Naked Bike Ride, which isn't naturist. It's using the naked body as a way to protest, a way to get people's attention. But it was an excellent opportunity for me to have a naked experience in public. But after that, it's like, am I going to wait an entire year to live this experience again? And it just seemed ridiculous to wait such a long period of time. So I decided that if nothing was going on, I was going to, you know, be proactive about it. Fortunately, we were able to find a Mesoamerican steam bath, it's called the Temazcal. And we were part of that for a year. But then after a while, we kind of wanted to do other things naked, not just the steam bath. So we had met several people by that time, and we, you know, brought up the idea, what if we do something else, like a party or an event or a gathering or, you know, just whatever. I think the opportunities are endless. And that's why I decided to start being more proactive. But I studied politics. I was active in a political party, and I was active in school politics. And so I was used to, you know, if something doesn't exist, let's find a way to make it ourselves. Like a do-it-yourself approach, but on social causes. So that's why I've been so proactive ever since, because that was my experience coming from nothing, and if I wanted something, I had to create it. But I understand that not everyone wants to do that because it's a lot of work, or has the need to do it because there's probably alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that, you know, for most naturists in the UK, the biggest thing that people are likely to have offered to them or available to them is the beach or swimming or saunas, that kind of thing. But I think that's where British Naturism are pretty good at the moment. As I say, it's not a good time because of COVID, but at organising events and trying to create different ways of bringing people together for interesting things, parties, different events. And you do see things crop up. I mean, actually, there is somebody who we know of through Twitter, but also coincidentally too, as kind of a friend of a friend, who actually used to, in Oxfordshire, the kind of district that we come from, used to organise naked dining evenings. So she would just link up with restaurants or bars, rent them out for the night, and have like a naked dining experience. So things like that we think would be kind of fun to do. Unfortunately, none of those have happened since we've been back in the country, because the restaurants aren't open.
But actually, in the
But,
UK, there's a lot more events now than there were, say, 5 years ago, when I would say there really wasn't much going on. But now there's naked dining, there's naked bars that have opened in London as pop-up bars. There's lots of naked skinny dips for charities, all kinds of charities do them. So there are all kinds of naked events in the UK, actually.
yeah.
And we will very much be involved in those when they come back, hopefully in about 6 or 8 months' time.
So,
Because it's...
Hannah, I have a question for you. What is your opinion on gender balance when it comes to naturism? What has been your experience? Have you noticed that there's less women than men involved?
Yeah, I think so. I think when we've done things like go to camping, it's perhaps not so bad. Like, you tend to get couples at things like campsites. But certainly, you know, if we go to the beach, the closest naturist beach to us, still not that close because we live right in the middle of the country, but definitely when you go, you know, on an average day on that beach, there will probably be 5 times as many single men as there are couples.
It seems to be much more of an issue in the UK than in other countries in Europe, which we visited. I mean, in France, our experience there is we haven't really noticed much of a gender imbalance. And in Germany, the same. But in England, it is, I wouldn't say, well, it is a problem. It's a problem for everyone. But I do feel very sorry for English single men who are naturists, because they are very often excluded, which is something we don't agree with. But a lot of clubs have restricted policies on the number of single men they will allow. And I also think that a single man naked is much more likely to be considered a threat in some way than a couple is. So I think it is, in England, it is a real problem, actually.
Yeah,
Donna has her work cut out, doesn't she?
Yeah, there definitely is an imbalance. And
how do you feel about that imbalance, Hannah?
I think it's a real pity, because I think there's lots of women who are missing out on something that, you know, they might really enjoy and that might be really beneficial to them. At the same time, though, I can understand to some extent why it's happened. I think there are several issues that women face. I think generally, and I know it's, you know, I know that a huge number of men, and perhaps increasingly so, have issues of body issues, confidence issues. But I think historically, it's been a much bigger issue for women. But I also think, perhaps more importantly, there's always been a lot more emphasis put on modesty being an important virtue for women, certainly in our culture.
Yeah.
You know, there's kind of, even still, a message that, you know, women should be modest and not expose themselves and not be deemed to be being sort of sexually promiscuous and all of these kind of things. And so I think a lot of those attitudes are perhaps tied up with women's concern that being naked is shameful or sinful, and that they're doing something wrong by being naked in public. And then, of course, there is just the vulnerability issue, the worry as a woman that, you know, that there's going to be some perv preying on you in some way. You know, I mean, I'm certainly comfortable as a couple being naked, but yeah, would I go on my own and sit on a beach on my own naked? I'm not sure that I would, because perhaps I would feel uncomfortable about the attention that I might get.
Mm-hmm. And we have seen that, haven't we? That in the rare occasions there are single women, they do get unwanted attention.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's a really difficult situation, because I do think that naturism would be much benefited if there was more of an equal participation of all demographics, including
absolutely, yeah.
But also there is a problem of harassment, and not only negative but also positive harassment. Like, I've noticed that even the places that feel like they're very positive about it, like they give women a special treatment. I personally feel like there shouldn't be a difference in prices. Like, for example, some clubs want women to go, so they feel like the best way to do it is making it free or making it cheaper, which I don't think that strategy is good, because at the end of the day, it's like the bar strategy. It's like girls' night is girls' night because it attracts a lot of men, and men have to pay extra prices for what they want, but they basically pay to hook up.
Yeah.
And that strategy doesn't work in naturism, because if you send out that message, it's like, if something is free, it's because you are the product. It's because you are what's being offered. So that gives the wrong impression. But it also has to do with a lot of systematic discrimination policies that make it either very difficult or impossible for men. I've heard examples of places that have kicked out men because their spouse passed away.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like they're yeah, it's true. It's
Extraordinary.
a horrible situation.
Yeah.
Their spouse passes away, you're all of a sudden a widow, but you're also a single man, so you're no longer welcome. So it's like, and I think we should focus more on creating a safe, comfortable environment where women feel respected and comfortable and safe. And some women will go, and once they have this positive experience, they'll share it with their friends, and it'll make it more and more normal. But some of us are, and by us I mean like the promoters or the leaders or the people that are creating these environments, are either lazy or don't understand that what they're doing is also reinforcing the idea. No one wants to be targeted. It's like, if I notice this a lot in the States, that tries to attract more cultural diversity, more different ethnicities, but maybe the way that they're handling it is probably too pushy. It's like, we want more whatever, like we want more Mexicans in our club. Mexicans, well, Mexicans don't have to pay. And like, as a Mexican, I would probably not go, because I think that strategy is a little creepy. It's a little weird. And I think it's no different for women.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's an incredibly difficult situation, actually, and I don't envy people like Donna, who are sort of tasked with trying to address the balance, because there are so many competing interests and so many different sides of the argument, and it's a very difficult, circle to square.
And it is a bit of a vicious circle, because once you get an imbalance, and obviously it's much harder to persuade women in this case to join, because of the imbalance. So then the imbalance just becomes greater. It feeds itself.
I don't know if our example would be representative of the general way that the world works, but we stopped attempting to create a gender balance, and it managed to stay at 30-70. So there's 70% men, 30% women, and we're doing nothing to change it, and it's remained that way. And it was very close to that when we had these strategies that were trying to push more women. I think women will eventually come once they know it's safe and it's comfortable, but also once society evolves to make it more welcoming for women in general. Like when women's bodies stop being a commodity that you can consume, that you could decide over, that you can, so as we become a more equal society, as there's more empowerment, more liberation, then naturally I think women will come along.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I personally don't think it's a problem that we can solve, because
it's not nature's problem, actually. It's society's problem.
It's a social
problem. And we're trying to solve something which we can't really solve, because solving it is not in our hands. It's you've got to address the culture of society to change it. It's not something that naturism can do, really.
But you can make it more welcoming. You can
make it more welcoming. Yeah, and I am against the sort of discrimination against single men. I don't think it's fair that if you want to practice naturism, that naturists wouldn't welcome you simply because of your gender. That's wrong.
Yeah, I kind of came to that conclusion when we were planning on how our community was going to be, and the idea of my wife now, I'm used to saying my girlfriend.
Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Oh,
Congratulations. We
Thank
we
you.
forgot actually.
Thank you.
Lovely news.
I'm gonna have to get used to saying my wife, but thinking that she was my ticket of entry, and like if she was no longer around for whatever reason, I would no longer be welcome. It's like, imagine building a community in which I'm no longer welcome because
Yeah.
my spouse is no longer with me,
Yeah.
or whatever. So I thought that that was probably not the best approach, but I do think that it will change. I have noticed that in our community, at least, that more and more single women are going by themselves. But that's part of the strategy that we have to integrate people. It's a little bit strict, to be honest, but I think that that level of security really has a psychological effect on a woman, that we're not saying every woman, that wants to participate doesn't have to pay, doesn't have to do the process, doesn't have to, because that special treatment doesn't feel secure. And also, them knowing that there's a procedure, and making sure that everything is safe, and it's a welcoming environment. I think that translates to more women wanting to participate in the long term. But it's complicated. At the end of the day, I feel like we're all betting on something that we don't really know if it's going to work or not. And hopefully we don't fall in discriminatory systematic practices. And if we find out that we do, then we have to do something to change it. Because at the end of the day, when we started doing this, we started doing it because we loved the experience, and because we felt that more and more people could benefit from this experience.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean, from your point of view, you would say it's the feeling of security, wouldn't you? That would encourage more people.
Yeah, I think, well, yes, I think there's that. But actually, I think, and I might be wrong, that actually the bigger issue for most women is body shame. And that's something that is not, as we were saying, not really within the gift of naturism to resolve. That's a societal issue.
Although naturism can solve it for the individual.
But you have to get them over that first hurdle.
I mean, the number of times we've talked to friends about naturism, and quite often people are quite keen, or they're interested, but so often we've heard from the women, nobody wants to see this. Nobody wants to see it, and they cast a glance down their own bodies, and it's such a tragedy.
Yeah.
And they even, people who have objectively, from society's point of view, good bodies, still think that they're somehow not good enough.
And that's the thing. It's like an invisible carrot that you are constantly trying to catch up. But the more that you go towards that carrot, the more the carrot goes farther away. So you're always stuck in this dilemma where you're never going to be good enough. But that's because the standard that we have been educated to meet is an unmeetable standard.
Yeah,
that's the whole point of it. You can't reach it, and it's deliberately unobtainable, because that means you keep buying the products, which supposedly will inch you towards that goal. But if people reach the goal, they'd stop buying the products, and that would be no good.
But it's also, I've heard that strategy, or that reasoning before, and I partially agree, but I also feel like the market will evolve. If these beauty products are no longer relevant, then those companies will decide to do something else. It's like if everyone becomes a naturist and all of a sudden clothes disappears, what is going to happen with the fashion industry? Well, they're going to create very nice designs of towels, very nice designs of footwear, and very nice jewelry. So the market will eventually evolve. It's the same thing that's happening with all this electronic wave, the electronic cars, and how we want to find renewable sources of energy and things like that. It's not like the industry is going to disappear. Maybe we'll stop buying and selling oil, but we'll find, like, if a company has enough vision, It will evolve to provide the service that
But
society.
the thing is that the companies, they don't just evolve to the environment they find themselves in. I mean, what companies try to do is they create demand. They create an environment where they are telling you what it is you want. And that's what all the big tech companies, that's what they're really out to do. They're out to tell you what you want, and then they will provide you with it because it's already on the shelf to hand to you.
Yeah.
So you know, they very much, these companies do very much want to control what you think so that they can deliver products to you, so that you'll be paying them endlessly.
So that means we need to create a successful business model that can enter the system and tell these tech companies that we have a lot of money that we want to spend on advertising, and they should tell everyone how great naturism is.
Well, that is absolutely true, Hector. I mean, if companies got a sniff of the fact that they could commoditize naturism, they would be in there overnight. So if you can create, whether that would be good for naturism or not, I don't know. But certainly, if you can create that environment, then the companies will be there, because after all, that they just want to make profit. They don't really. Capitalism isn't really moral. They don't really care about morals. They just want to sell you something.
It's true, but I also feel like it's not. I mean, for all of those hardcore philosophical naturists that are against turning naturism into something mainstream, they will also always have the ability to continue to be moral, philosophical naturists.
They will, yeah.
That's not
Absolutely.
going to disappear. The only thing
No.
that is going to change is that other people are going to have access and alternatives and a variety of choices, which at the end of the day doesn't hurt naturism. It might hurt my philosophical view on what naturism should be, but despite the fact that people have or don't have these options, that's not going to change. So it's like saying, I don't want other people to choose because they don't want to choose what I think is best. So it's like, I don't want to get rid of, I don't know, like the clothing industry. I don't want to get rid of clothes. I see a very practical use in clothes. I sometimes like clothes, but what I want is to be able to choose whether I get dressed or not. I don't want it to be socially or legally or in other sense imposed on me. And that's the idea that I try to push forward, because I've noticed
but they don't want you to have that choice. The big companies don't want you to have that choice. They want to tell you what to think, and they want to feed you the products that they make. And I think capitalism would always believe that they'd make much more money from you not liking your body than being comfortable with it.
And I also don't feel like we haven't grown to the point where the companies actually know that we exist or actually care about our existence. Maybe if we become big enough, they might be against it, but by that time, it's probably going to be too late when they become aware of our existence. So I don't know. It's an interesting conversation that generates a lot of controversy, but I also feel like sometimes we get very radical approaches. I don't think reality is white or black. There's a lot of shades of gray. And what I think is valuable is that there should be a perfect shade of gray for you to choose if you want to choose it. And if you don't want to choose it, it should never be imposed on you. And maybe these businesses do have this strategy to tell you what you want, but every day more and more people are against the idea to be told what they want. And I think that society is evolving to the point where we're choosing. We want to choose who we want to love, regardless of their gender, regardless of their age, regardless of so many things that we have been told. We want to choose a type of relationship we want to be in. Why should we be told that you have to be in a married relationship, or you have to have children, or you have to own a house, or you have to eat meat, or you have to whatever? And this is a trend that is growing. And I think that at the end of the day, if we don't share our lifestyle, naturism or the idea of social nudity will eventually become mainstream on its own. I think the only difference is whether we're going to be around when it happens or not, and whether we facilitate that happening.
She might be.
Well, I suspect Hector's younger than I am.
Yeah, Hector.
Well,
Moved on.
being young is not a guarantee of anything, but
No, well, it's true.
True.
so I have another controversial question. I like to start, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I like to start controversial discussions, especially on Twitter. And then when they get too controversial, I'll either let it go on its own, or sometimes if I feel it gets out of hand, I'll try to intervene and try to do
We
something.
have noticed that. You sort of throw a hand grenade and then retire and see what happens.
Well, but it's also important because these things exist whether we talk about them or not. And the more that we have the ability to talk about them, the more we can find a middle ground and notice that it's not completely on this side or completely on that side. Sometimes we're in the middle. So the next controversial question is, what do you guys think about the idea, or I've noticed there's a trend of people wanting to sexualize naturism. And the sex topic is very controversial because there's no denying that sex is a very important part of our lives, but also I think it also has to do with the agenda that naturism has as a movement, as a philosophy. And I think that agenda has to do with, as a movement, lowering the entry barrier, the barrier of entry, or I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but the access that people have to it. And the moment that you sexualize something, I feel that it makes it for a specific audience, and it makes it different or difficult for other audiences. But then again, as I was mentioning before, maybe there could be or should be an alternative for those who do want to sexualize it. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think our view is probably that they're sort of two separate activities, as it were. You know, there's nothing wrong with sexualized public nudity if that's what you want to do. But also there is a space for non-sexual nudity, and that should be preserved as a separate thing, I think. So I suppose what I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with either, but I think that there does need to be a clear divide between the two, so that kind of people know what they're getting, and that people who want to just be involved in, you know, feeling liberated, not wearing clothes, perhaps want to engage in it as a wholesome family activity, don't feel that there's a risk of it becoming something sexual. So I think there is a place for both, but there needs to be a clear demarcation between the two, so that people in any given circumstance know where they stand.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've written a blog about it, and I think that the people get confused about it because they wear the same uniform for both. You know, when you have sex, you're naked, and when you're a naturist,
you're naked.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I know. Nick always says that. I was
Yeah.
like, not everybody even does that naked.
It's true. I'm old school.
Some people wear pajamas.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could get a kick out of that too.
But I think they you know, although they're the same uniform, they're a different activity. And I think it is, for me, I think it's quite important that there should be a divide between the two. Because I think that there are lots of people who would want to practice naturism, but would be very fearful of it turning sexual. And if you try to mix it, you put so many people off doing it, particularly where children are involved, for example. So we don't have any problem with social sexual nudity, but we don't call that naturism. And we're quite happy with that. If you want to be a swinger, that's absolutely fine. But I don't think, you know, people who say, well, I'm a swinger and a naturist, that's fine too. But you're not doing that at the same time. You're doing one or the other. And we quite often have this, people quite often challenge us on the Twitter about this point, and that is our position, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think it's a matter of language. The problem is that we want to sexualize naturism, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't have a sexualized social nude environment. But I don't think they should be called the same thing. I don't
No.
No.
I don't think there's anything wrong with someone engaging in a non-sexual practice and also deciding that they do like a sexual practice.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I don't
But
feel like they should
you
be
don't
both.
use the same name for both.
Yeah, and I do
Yeah.
notice that most of the people that are trying to push this idea basically want to impose their porn on you
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a very direct way to say it, because I've noticed that it's like, okay, so I'm a naturist, but I also like to share or retweet or like pornographic posts. That's great, but I don't have to be forced to consume it. Like if
Yeah.
I don't like what you're sharing, regardless of whether it's naturist or not, I can choose whether I want to consume it or not. And if I don't want to consume it, then why should you, call it sex positivity and say that I'm wrong because I don't want to, you know? But it also, and also, I also notice it as a business strategy. As you guys were talking before, there's certain interests in wanting to push this idea to make naturism more sexy because I want to sell my pictures, or I want to sell my
Yeah.
videos, or I want to, and there's nothing wrong with selling your pictures or your videos. The only problem is if you call it naturism, then you're causing a confusion. And at the end of the day, you're affecting the work that we have built to try to make people understand that nudity doesn't always have to be sexual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we absolutely agree with
Yeah,
everything you've just
absolutely.
said. I think we're completely on the
Yeah.
same page.
But
That we've got no problem with people doing any of those things, but just call it something else and don't perpetuate the misunderstanding that naturism has to be about sex. And I think the people that call themselves naturists and post porn are doing exactly that. They're reinforcing the mistake that naturism has to be about sex.
Yeah, I mean, we're on Twitter. There's a lot of people who spend an awful lot of time blocking followers that have any kind of porn in their timelines, or they've liked porn or whatever it is. We absolutely don't do that. We don't seek to curate people's private lives. It's nothing to do with us. If they want to follow us, that's fine. Why would we want to sort of control what they do in the rest of their lives?
We won't follow. We don't follow them back because we don't want to see their content. But we're not. Yeah, as I say, we're not in the habit of sort of censoring our followers.
I mean, I think
it's the same thing with politics. I don't necessarily agree with everything that's going on in the world, but I do understand that some of the things that go on in the world are not my business as a Mexican. Like, I'm very well aware of the elections and everything that's going on in the States.
No.
Because I think it's amusing. I think it's entertaining. I watch it because it's like a reality show. But I studied politics. And there was a point in my life where I was very, everyone should think this, and this is great, and social justice and whatever. But then it came to a point where it became very energy draining. I just became very exhausted because I was always debating online and wanting to convince people. And at the end of the day, it's the same thing, the same conclusion that I came with naturism. It's like, well, no, if you want to push something on people, people are going to reject it. So the only thing that you can do is lead by example. And if you're having a great time, maybe you can inspire other people to do the same, but you're not pushing it down their throats. So if I try not to follow highly political accounts, regardless of whether they're naturist or not, because it's just none of my business, and because it's exhausting. It's like there's so much negativity going on, so much divisiveness, so much conflict, that the last thing that I want to consume is that. So I think that similar, to give another example of something that is hyper sexualized, or something that is hyper politicized, or maybe if someone was a big fan of soccer or football and they would always post how great this was, and I'm not interested in it, I probably wouldn't follow it either.
Yeah.
And the thing is, on Twitter, if you don't follow somebody, you don't see what's in their timeline. So, I mean, people say, well, I don't allow people who follow porn to follow me because then I'll see what they are liking. But you don't. On Twitter, you only see the things that are liked by the people that you actually follow. So people don't need to worry about it anyway.
I think it's more that people are worried about the association, being associated with somebody who, if someone's following you, you're in some way associated with them, and therefore in some way condoning what they're doing.
Yeah, but
we don't, we don't subscribe to that. When you've got a large social media following, you just can't.
You can't, and we don't want to anyway.
Yeah.
We don't want to judge other people's lives. If they want to follow us and see what we're doing and what we're posting, that's great. And I'm not going to say, well, you can't see what we're doing because I don't like your political persuasion, for example, or other things that you've liked in your life, or that you like red wine but I like white wine. That seems to me to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
And there are sort of some militant naturists who try to pretend that there is no sex in naturism, but all naturists do have sex. At least
probably most.
All
the ones.
All the ones I.
Yeah, but I mean, it's as anything in life. There's a time and there's a place. Yeah. If you want to do both, you can. The only thing that I would suggest is to make sure that your audience understands that there's a difference.
Yeah.
As long as the audience understands there's a difference, I have no problem with it. I actually follow a couple of accounts that post things that are not completely naturist, and it's people that I know, it's their friends, and in a way they have their own movements or their own battles going on. And I agree with, there should be, more options for people. People shouldn't be forced. And it's funny because when I became a naturist because I loved the ability to be myself. I love the ability to be free. I love the ability to choose, and I love the ability of not being told what I should do or how I should, handle my body or whatever. And then some people take it the next step and they decide that, well, now I have to tell everyone else how they should be, or I have to conform to other people's standards. And I've fallen in this mistake with my physical health. There was, like, at the beginning, I didn't want to be a naturist leader that was an athletic naturist leader, because I thought that people would dismiss naturism because it was only for fit people. But then that led me to a lot of unhealthy habits, especially during the quarantine, where I had nothing else to do but to drink, eat, and then I gained a lot of weight and I didn't feel comfortable. I felt anxious. I was having a lot of, problems because of what I was putting in my body. And then I decided that, I don't consider myself to be athletic in any sense, but if I ever do become athletic, then I don't think that should be any different. And it probably has something to do with, the way that people use or have their body hair, or whether they choose to wear jewelry or not, or whether it's like people could do whatever they want.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you've raised, because actually it's something that we've been criticized might be too strong a word, but people on numerous occasions have made the observation of, well, it's okay for you to, because you're slim, for example. And it's like, I'm really sorry, that is who I am. I can't be fat to please you. All we're doing is, trying to be positive about ourselves and create and to just be ourselves and say everybody has the right to be themselves. And I'm really sorry that if, the way I look
offends you
in some way,
you don't offend me.
It is really tricky, and I can understand I can sometimes understand where people are coming from, but at the end of the day,
we are who we are.
We are who we are. we can't change, we can't change that, or aren't prepared to change that to satisfy a minority of social media followers.
Well, you can never keep anyone happy anyway. You know
No.
what social media is like.
But that's
it's
that's
impossible.
Also part of Twitter. If people are not unhappy on Twitter, then they're not true.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
You can't be well. I'm being sarcastic in case no one understands. But I agree. Like, people will always be unhappy about what you do or what you don't do, and I think it's ridiculous to criticize someone by something they can't change. Like, there's people that want to put on weight and can't put on weight, and if people decide to promote naturism, it's ridiculous to try to put them down because of their body. It's the same thing with people that want to lose weight. There's people that do everything to lose weight and they can't. But the easiest way, or the easiest thing that they could do, is to learn to love and accept themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, we're having a bit of a joke about it now, but generally speaking, we found the Twitter community to be really supportive and a friendly, nice community. Actually, we get very little kind of trolling on Twitter. We have been quite lucky in that we also get relatively little sort of unsolicited messaging, that I think is something that people battle with. But I think that's partly a settings issue.
It's a settings
so we don't, we have that function set up so that you cannot message us if we don't follow you, which has its limitations, because I appreciate that sometimes people might have a genuine question about naturism. But actually, the way we get around that is sometimes people put a comment on a picture saying, I've got a question I want to ask you about naturism. Can you follow me or can you, unblock me to send you a message? And that's fine. But it means that we don't get all the creepy, people asking us for sex and
we did
stuff.
For a time. For about a week, we changed the settings to see what would happen. And it wasn't too bad, but there were a surprising number of people who thought we'd probably want to have sex with them and that we would somehow benefit from that.
Or that we wanted to see pictures of,
I get a lot of unsolicited pictures. And I think I want to take advantage of this opportunity to tell people that the fact that I'm a naturist or that I'm promoting naturism doesn't mean I want you to send pictures of yourself or your spouse in any setting, but like compromising or very highly eroticized, or it's like, oh, look at me, I'm a naturist as well, and you see a picture like with an erection or like very uncomfortable positions where the camera is down and it's going up. Like the first thing that you see is the genitals. I'm not afraid of genitals, but it's like, why do you feel the need to share that? And don't share that. It's like,
it's a weird thing. But as I say, I think partly the way we have our settings, but I think partly because generally speaking, our kind of Twitter community seems to be actually just like pretty much a nice group of people. We had more trouble actually previously when we were on Instagram with both unsolicited kind of positive comments, but or people who thought they were being positive but were actually just being creepy. But also trolling, people who were just mean. People making negative comments about our bodies, or making comments about our age difference, and quite personal comments about things like that.
I think that we're probably quite lucky being a couple. That does seem to have made a difference, because from what we've heard from single men and single women on Twitter, they get far more unsolicited mail and pictures. We just don't seem to get that. And maybe it's because we're a couple, I don't know.
But also, as Hannah mentioned, it has to do with the settings. Do you guys reply to all of the comments?
We respond to every comment, almost every comment. Wow. So either with a like or with a response of some kind. And certainly if people ask questions, we always answer.
If people ask a question, we'll try to respond to the question. If people just say, oh, really cool picture or whatever, we might give them a like. We won't, say engage necessarily with every single comment.
But if people say, nice arse, for example, they don't get a like.
No. Yeah, people who make kind of comments like that, they get ignored.
I ignore them until they become nasty or like too personal or something like that. And then that's the only time that I will actually ban someone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
on
blocked
Twitter, we've blocked
maybe
very few.
10 or 12 people, maybe.
Yeah.
That's really been it. We seem to have been very lucky.
And then for me, it's ridiculous the amount of time that some people put into curating their followers.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's putting the message through a very high barrier. It's like you have to be morally capable of consuming my content.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is actually, we were saying at the beginning of this discussion, to some extent, we want to promote naturism. We want to send a message about what naturism is. Kind of, what's the point of preaching to the converted? What's the point of only sending that message to people who have demonstrated that they're, strong naturists? Why not actually send the message to people who might share a lot of porn and things, that actually, do you know what, nudity can be something other than that?
And we have had a couple of occasions where people have sent us messages saying that they had followed us because
they thought it was going to be a sexual account.
But that we had sort of opened their eyes to there being a different side of nudity, non-sexual nudity. And so, although it's few and far between, it has happened.
Yeah, and the way I see it is the message is out there to whoever decides to consume it.
Yeah.
And whatever they decide to do with it, it's their problem, not mine.
Absolutely, yeah.
I have been told by so many people that my videos or my pictures or whatever are on whatever porn website. And I honestly don't care, because for me, I'm sending a message. People could either decide to understand that message or decide to do whatever they want with the message. But the moment that that message is public, there's nothing you can do to control it. It's completely out of, and it's something that we have to understand, people who promote this, that once you post something, you have no control over it.
Yeah. I mean, we get dozens of messages every day from people saying, oh, have you seen this? Your photo's being posted here, this, that, and the other. And we always are really grateful for people flagging things with us. And often we'll contact the people that have posted it and say, please, could you remove this if it's a kind of site that we disapprove of? Or we'll just say, please, could you credit us for using our photo, But most of the time we're responding to people saying, thanks for flagging it. But, we know this is happening. Actually, there's nothing we can do about it. The only thing we can do about this is to stop posting content. Yeah. There's nothing you can do to protect your content.
But then you stop posting content and then you stop your message,
Yeah.
I mean, you have to, if you go on social media with this kind of message, you have to have broad shoulders and you have to be aware what you're getting into. And, that's one of the reasons that, people sometimes say, oh, well, we never see Hannah full frontal. Well, that's one of the reasons, because we don't know where the pictures are going to end up. And we've even had people pretending to be us. They've opened entire websites with our entire lives on them, just with different names.
I don't know what they get out of it.
This is what I always say. It's like, we found somebody who was using all of my pictures on a dating site. And it was like, her date's going to get a shot.
Yeah. It's
when
like
a completely different
not what I was expecting. It's like, I know people tend to look different online, but wow.
Yeah.
Not that different. But yeah, that is a weird thing. And it is difficult. And, I can understand sometimes people's criticism of the fact that I don't ever, I mean, there are some photos that are the front of me, but often at a distance. But I tend not to post any pictures that contain any very graphic images of my genitals. And I can understand that some people say, well, if you're a naturism and you're promoting nudity and you think there's nothing shameful about that, then that's a slight inconsistency. And to some extent, I accept that. But I suppose my response to that is my pictures turn up all the time out of context in really inappropriate places. And whilst in the context of our feed, which is very clearly a non-sexual, promoting naturism, we think quite kind of wholesome feed, our pictures make sense. When they're posted on a porn site next to pornography, suddenly my picture could start to look like porn. And I don't want my pictures to be being used in that way and to be being kind of turning up in that context. So that's, the way I justify it. And I appreciate not everybody will agree with that. People will say, if you're in it, you're in it, and you should be promoting that there's nothing shameful or embarrassing about your genitals. But, just from my experience, my pictures turn up in all sorts of places. And I'd rather have a degree of control about, what people are seeing, or to be absolutely sure that they can never be like, I suppose look at it this way, that if my mum stumbled across them, she wouldn't be like, why are you posting porn of yourself on the internet,
And I think there is a big difference between naturism on a beach and putting stuff online. They aren't the same environments at all.
Yeah. So being naked in public isn't the same as posting pictures of yourself all around the world on the internet. So just
something much more simple than that. It's just people share online what they feel comfortable with sharing online.
Yeah.
And regardless of what their motives are, that doesn't make you more or less anything.
No. I mean, I agree. But it is something that I'm aware that we have been, or I have been sort of criticized for, but that's kind of my justification, really. When you become aware, as you say, that your pictures are turning up anywhere, and being used in a kind of pornographic context, I'd rather keep a kind of degree of control over how much detail is being shown in our pictures.
It's not such a problem with my pictures.
What, them showing up in strange places?
Yeah, they don't seem to. I don't know why.
I wonder why. I mean,
you're on a very specialist site somewhere, I'm sure.
Thanks very much.
But I think that's a problem with women in general. They are,
of course,
their bodies are a commodity that people consume, and I think it's it's wrong. But we can choose whether we want to post something or not, and that shouldn't mean anything. And also, the people that are complaining about that probably just want to see a picture of your genitals. But that is
I think it's probably both. I think there are some people who that's probably true, and I think there are just other people who are so kind of militant about naturism that
Yeah, I mean, everyone's motivation is different, but
Have you guys been recognized in a nature setting or anywhere that, are you guys Two Naturist?
Yeah, so on the beach, pretty much since we've been back in the country, we've done about 3 or 4 trips to the beach, and every time we've been, someone has come up to speak to us. But the weirdest one actually happened when we were in the Caribbean in Grenada. We were walking down like a high street in town, and a guy suddenly sort of shouted out of a cafe at us, excuse me. And the first thing he said, are you the people on the boat? And at first, we were on an island where a lot of cruise ships came in. And so at first I thought he was asking, like, are you from the cruise ship? And that they were going to try and sell us something. And we were like, no, we live here. And he was like, no, Nick and Hannah, I've seen you on the internet. This is really weird, because we were on a sort of Caribbean island where there is not a lot of nudity.
He was actually Canadian, wasn't he?
Well, he was Grenadian originally, but lived in Canada. Canadian guy visiting his family back in the Caribbean, who recognized us from Twitter, sorry. That was quite weird.
So it does happen, and it's very weird, but it's not actually nice. It's a nice way of striking up a conversation with people. It's actually, we quite like it.
Yeah, but that example was the weirder one because it wasn't in a naturist context. It was walking down the street. But yeah, we tend to, like on the beach now, it's kind of strange, but we tend to get recognised. And when we went to the British Naturism camping event, there were sort of 2 or 3 people there who knew us. But it's nice in a way because, like I said earlier, because we're not people who necessarily really put ourselves forward. Actually, the fact that people come and approach us, it opens up some conversations that we might not necessarily have with other people, which is a really good thing.
So have you guys been asked by anyone in these naturist settings to take pictures or something like that? Like, oh, can I?
No, nobody's asked that, actually.
No, we haven't actually.
No, we're still waiting for that moment when someone says, oh, can I have a selfie with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I think we had a couple of people, when we were at British Naturism, the summer camp, I think there were a few people who we kind of shared, posts with on social media. So we kind of tagged people that we'd met in posts and said, really nice to meet you at some folk or whatever. But yeah, no, we've definitely not had anybody who said, can you pose for me with, pose with me for a picture? That would be weird.
It's really hard to get used to this idea of all of a sudden being recognized by people, or the saying hi is really nice. The wanting to take a picture is also nice. But then it comes to a point where people feel like you have to, like, I don't know, like you have to go out of your way to make them, to integrate them, or to, take, like, for example, I had an experience in Cipolite at the airport during a festival, where this person recognized me, and he walked up to me, he said, "Hi, Hector, I came to this event because of you." And for me, it was very nice and flattering. And I said, thank you. I talked to this person for a while. He asked me how he could go from the airport to Cipolite. I explained to him all the ways that you can do this. And then at the end, he asked if he could go with us. And we were in a group of 11 people. And the service that we hired to take us to the beach was exactly for 11 people. And unfortunately, they couldn't come with us because we had the 11 people that we needed. So this person got so offended that every time I saw him during the festival, I would look and, try to grin and like, oh, hey, but the person would just turn away. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what happened. I don't know what I did, but this person no longer wants to, is avoiding me. I noticed that the person was avoiding me. So when we were on our way back at the airport, or on the flight, unfortunately, Andrea and I couldn't sit in the same place. So Andrea went with it was a group of two men. And during the time that they were flying, the guy was upset and complaining to Andrea that I wasn't welcoming enough, that they had a horrible experience because they didn't meet anyone, and that it was all my fault because I didn't take the time to integrate them with everyone, because I didn't, and it was, I think that level of wanting something from someone that you think because you saw them online, was very strange to me, because I actually feel like I was being nice to the person that I was helping. I wasn't avoiding him. I wasn't, oh yeah, whatever, and going on my way, which I don't think there's anything wrong if I would have been in that situation, because maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm busy, maybe I'm doing something else. But when you reach a certain audience, people start having expectations of you, of how you should treat them, or what you should do, or what you should not do. And I think that's something really hard to get used to. And it's very creepy that all of a sudden people you don't know have expectations of who you are, what you should be, or where you, I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly not had any experiences like that, but I guess it would probably be fair to say that sometimes when we do meet people who have recognized us, perhaps I do slightly have a feeling of, oh, I need to kind of be on my best behavior and be really nice to these people.
You have some obligation.
Because that you have an obligation, but also that sounds like a really weird way to put this maybe, but that we have a kind of brand to protect. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if people know you, you don't then suddenly want to get a reputation for being arseholes. Like, you know, and it would only take a few people in the community to go, oh, I've met these two, you know, they're really rude. And it starts to, you know, spread and become a big thing in the community. So I suppose I am conscious of always wanting to make sure that we are really, you know, people who recognize that we are really nice and try to, you know, engage them, and that we're really respectful. Not that I don't treat all people like that, if I can, but I guess it raises an extra little bit of pressure that you always have this thought of, oh, okay, well, people in this community know us now, so perhaps there's a little bit of a higher duty or a higher expectation of us.
And I think that one of the funny things about celebrity, not that we're celebrities, but one of the things about celebrity is that people think that celebrities are their friends.
They think they know you.
Yeah, they think they know you, and so when you meet, they think that you should react as though you're an old friend.
Yes, and you know nothing about them.
And you know nothing about them. And people often say, you know, I follow you on Twitter, and it feels bad saying, well, I don't know who you are, because I think, you know, each follower thinks that we know them personally, we take an interest in their lives, and of course that's impossible.
It is impossible, and sometimes have you gotten messages of, oh, I think you should follow me? Or,
all the time. Why didn't you follow me back? It's like, yeah, we get these kind of, I followed you and I've been sending you messages and you haven't followed me back. It's like, well, we probably looked at your content and thought it was inappropriate. We didn't.
Or we don't want to. And I think that's something that people should understand. It's, if someone is doing something and they have some level of notoriety or some level of whatever you want to call it, they're still people. They still have things going on. They have interests. They might be tired. They might, you know, and you shouldn't expect, like, I see all of a sudden like videos of celebrities being shamed by their fans because they didn't want to take a selfie or because whatever. And it's like, can you imagine sitting at a public place enjoying, you know, the beach or a meal or whatever, and just having people walk up to you and wanting you to give them your time, your energy, it comes to a point where it's not practical. And I think people should be comprehensive about that. I, for example, I don't reply to direct messages. I actually had a problem with addiction of social media. When we started growing the platform and things that we were doing, everyone wanted to talk to me. Everyone wanted, and not just because they had something going on, they just wanted to talk to me. They wanted me to hear about their problems and their life and I would reply to all of these messages. I would try to be as engaging and everything as possible, but it came to a point where I couldn't enjoy a meal with my partner because I was on the phone, you know, from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, I was on the phone. And it's a very bad place to be in. And then I took the completely opposite approach, and now I only use it as professional because I consider that what I'm doing in a certain sense is professional. Some people get upset by that, but I don't have the time, or maybe I'm not willing to do it. And I think people should understand that.
Yeah, they should. I think it's quite, you know, you can make it clear to people. You can, you know, if you say, I don't reply to direct messages, it's there for everybody to see. It's about sort of managing expectations, you know. So I think, you know, maybe it doesn't, you know, not a problem for us because we don't have that many people messaging us. But I can certainly see a time where we might not be able to reply to every message. And at that stage, I don't know, maybe I might consider putting something on the site saying, we don't reply to messages. You know, just, it's nothing to do with you personally. We just don't have time to do it.
I think I haven't done that because there's a lot of people who I would want to engage with, to have collaborations, conversations, or other things like that. And I don't want them to feel like I'm not interested. But sometimes it's just, I think the main things that I don't want to engage in is just like everyday conversation. Oh, how are you doing? Or you know, good morning, or hi, or that kind of stuff. It's just like, I don't know. I think that it's very easy to get caught up in that. And it's very easy to dedicate endless hours of your day, and then you don't get anything done. You don't enjoy your meal. You don't, your partner gets upset because you're not paying attention when she's talking to you.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
I think also, you know, like you're saying earlier, if you're getting messages from people wanting to talk about their lives and things, that can get quite emotionally draining. Like if people effectively offloading their burdens onto you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't study psychology. I don't really know how to handle these things. Sometimes I have body issues. I have, you know, body dysmorphia or whatever, and I'm like, I can't.
I want to help you with that.
Yeah.
Maybe if I tried to do it, you would end up worse. So
Yeah.
it's in your best interest for me not to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So guys, I want to thank you very much for the time. It's been, I've noticed that these conversations can easily go into the hours. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for dedicating this time. I hope
Well, thank you for having us.
We'll have the opportunity to meet in a naturist gathering, enjoy a couple of drinks by the pool.
I hope so.
And I really like what you guys are doing. I think it's very important to share the experiences. I feel like if our community would be more open about their naturist lifestyle, it would help normalize it. Because as, for example, Linda has a project called I Am the Face of Naturism. The idea behind that project is for anyone to understand that they can also be the face of naturism. So maybe sometimes we complain because we're not seeing enough of insert the blank demographic people within our community, and it's nice for more and more people who are, you know, genuine about it, open about it, share it, and I think that's going to help normalize it. So what you guys are doing is great. It's awesome. I hope you guys, once the quarantine is over, can continue your adventures traveling. Your photos are very nice. The experiences, I think it's really great. And I want to invite anyone who is interested in getting to know a little bit more of Hanna and Nick to go to their Twitter. As I mentioned before, that the account is going to be linked in the description of this video and also on the tweet. Is there anything you guys would like to say before we end this conversation?
No, just that it's been a pleasure to speak to you. It's been really some interesting conversation, and yeah, good to get to know you a little bit better.
It's been great to get to know you too, Hector. It's great, and I can't wait till we can meet in person.
When if we find ourselves in Mexico, we'll give you a call.
I can try that funny whiskey you've got.
Yeah, hopefully sometime soon. We still want to be able to have a space where we can receive naturists. The house that we tried to turn into a club ended up not working, so we rented it. We were sharing the rent with roommates that unfortunately are not naturists. Once things get a little bit better financially, we want to have the space for ourselves and have a couple of rooms where we can accommodate guests and things like that. We also are looking forward to having a more of a foreigner integration program in our events. Right now, we're only focused on Mexicans because we don't have the commodities that you might need if you're coming from another country or you know, that kind of stuff. But in the future, hopefully, and if that's the case, I would love to receive you guys. Maybe you guys could stay in Guadalajara for a while. There's not much naturist related here, but there's places where we can go and things that we can do. And I'm sure that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'd love to come.
Yeah, and keep up all your good work. You're doing really good stuff over there, Hector.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Not just over there, all around the world.
Well, that's true. That's true.
I have a hard time keeping to myself.
Well, that's good for naturism, so thank you.
Thank you, guys. So if anyone is interested, find the links in the description, and thank you for joining A Naked Conversation with